Seeing that we have a quorum, I'd like to call to order or to continuation this week of budget hearings. Tonight is Wednesday, August 21st, 2019. And tonight we are going to be hearing from the Bloomington Housing Authority, then from the Housing and Neighborhood Development Department. Then we have Community and Family Resources. I'm sorry, before that, I believe we have Economic and Sustainable Development.
Right.
Then we have Community and Family Resources, and then we have Parks and Recreation. So, Mr. Renison, did you want to make some introductory comments?
Just real briefly, I want to introduce our two presenters for the Bloomington Housing Authority. That will be Janice Price and Daniel Harmon. Amber Scobie is out actually at a training that was pre-scheduled, and she couldn't be here today, so she sent two very qualified staff members, and they're looking forward to presenting to you tonight. As the council is aware, this is not a budget you approve, but we've invited, the Hamilton administration has invited BHA each year during the budget presentation to let you know the good work that they're doing in the community and talk about affordable housing that they're providing for the residents of Bloomington. So with that, I'll let Janice and Daniel take it away. They too have rehearsed, so they'll stick to the time, and we're ready for this evening.
Noted in previous nights, we're trying to limit the time for presentations and for questions. 10 minutes has been allotted to the Bloomington Housing Authority, and we will ask no more than 8 minutes of questions. And so we're going to do 80% of whatever the presentation time is. So please go ahead.
Here you go.
Hello, I'm Janice Price. I'm the property manager for the Bloomington Housing Authority, and joining me is Daniel Harmon, Housing Choice Voucher Program Manager. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to share the fiscal year 2020 budget and programming information for the BHA. My goal tonight is to give you a quick snapshot of our 2020 budget goals with overall income and expense projections. This budget proposal is informational only for the City Council tonight, since the Housing Authority Board of Commissioners will be reviewing and approving this fiscal year 2020 budget at their September meeting per HUD requirements. You all are invited to attend that meeting. Again, thank you for this platform to talk about the BHA and how it is contributing to affordable housing in our beloved community, and how we are managing federal funding from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to administer and operate these programs. I would like to start with a reminder of our mission and why the BHA exists. We strengthen opportunity, beginning but not ending with housing. We uphold our mission by owning and operating 312 units of low-income public housing, administering over 1,300 Section 8 vouchers, including those that house homeless veterans, assist those with mental challenges, and are tied to permanent supportive housing. Besides housing, we also offer resident service and self-sufficiency programs. A large majority of our funding comes from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. We also earn funding through tenant rent collection, CDBG funds, and miscellaneous small grants. Here is a quick overview of the affordable housing and self-sufficiency programs offered by the BHA. Like always, 2019 has been another very busy year. Some of the highlights include a 97% occupancy rate in the public housing program, 97% utilization of the Section 8 voucher program, 2,881 applications for housing received, 12 graduates of our family self-sufficiency program, 70 participants in our Step Up program, major renovation of 1033 and 1037 Summit Street, which are now wheelchair accessible 4-bedroom units. We assembled $12.8 million in financing to complete 116 unit renovations through the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program. We hope to start renovations on those units in early 2020. And $10.3 million in federal subsidy to provide housing and self-sufficiency programs for those in our community. What are our goals for this upcoming fiscal year beginning October the 1st? We want to promote and provide access to training opportunities to better prepare both staff and commissioners for RAD conversion and new enterprising opportunities. Prepare and complete pre-development work for Crestmont's RAD conversion. We need to pay for environmental reviews, market studies, architect fees, attorney fees, et cetera. Address unit physical improvements that impact health and safety. This especially applies to Crestmont, which will not be renovated for another 2 years or so. And we want to expand the project-based voucher program. We want to promote affordability in new construction projects. Now to the budgets. Let's start with our public housing program operating budget. On the left side of this slide is the operating income, and the table on the right is the operating expenses. There are 2 separate columns for AMP1, or what we call Crestmont, or AMP2, which is the combination of Reverend Butler and Walnut Woods, as these are separate projects under the asset management module. Operating income primarily comes from tenant rent collected, operating subsidy, tenant charges such as excess utility fees, and other tenant charges. We also receive over $51,000 for a resident services grant, which helps fund our step-up program coordinator position. The largest source of income for public housing programs is the operating subsidy, which is calculated based on a HUD formula. This formula, which HUD determines the level to effectively run public housing program, is then subject to proration. The current proration factor is around 94%. We estimate receiving $727,000 in operating subsidy for Crestmont and $400,000 for Walnut Woods and Reverend Butler. On the expense side, the major expenses include administrative fees to cover salaries and benefits, office overhead, staff training costs, and fees paid to the cost center. The public housing program pays utilities such as gas, electric, and water. Maintenance and operation cost includes maintenance labor, maintenance materials, and appliances. Contract costs include costs for garbage and trash removal, electrical repairs, plumbing repairs, pest control, and painting. Property insurance, liability insurance, auto, and workers' compensation are factored into insurance expenses. The total rental and operating income for Crestmont is projected to be $1,468,000. Expenses are projected to be $1,285,000. The income for this project exceeds expenses by $182,000. The total rental and operating income for Reverend Butler and Walnut Woods is projected to be $709,000. Expenses are projected to be $672,000, leaving a difference of $36,500. That concludes my portion of this presentation, and I'll turn it over to my colleague, Daniel Harmon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Price.
Hello, I'm Daniel Harmon, Housing Choice Voucher Program Manager. Now let's review program budget for HCV program. From a funding standpoint, the Housing Choice Voucher Program is our largest in terms of HUD funding received. It is a huge economic boost to property owners in our community. The largest amount of income received is for housing assistance payments, which is estimated to be over $8.5 million in 2020. We also received funding through the Family Self-Sufficiency FSS program to fund 2 coordinator positions. The next largest income is through administrative fees, which are earned by unit months leased. After the initial calculation of full eligibility based on unit months leased, around $860,000 typically, for administrative fees, that amount is subject to proration. HUD has funded administrative fees at 76 to 77% in fiscal year 2019, and that proration level is carried to this fiscal year 2020. Admin fees are estimated at $747,000, an increase of over $100,000 from fiscal year 2018. On the expense side, I expect all HAP to be spent and administrative expenses to be $725,102. FSS program costs are around $94,000. Fuel expenses for our inspector's vehicle should be $800. Insurance expenses around $9,600, and other general expenses at $20,000. These are collection losses from repayment agreements. Income exceeds expenses by around $50,000. I have also included the single-room occupancy program budget on the end column. You can see that income equals expenses. We are required to pay HUD back for any unspent funding under the SRO program. The last program area is the Central Office Cost Center. The cost center is made up of key executive and financial staff that acts as a business unit within the BHA, charged with management, oversight, and accounting functions. The public housing, HCV, and capital fund programs are charged fees which are paid to the cost center. Cost center funding is considered non-federal, giving the cost center the ability to fund items not directly related to these individual programs. Total income for the cost center is projected to be $639,000 and expenses to be $526,000. And that concludes our presentation. We are happy to answer any questions you may have and encourage you to check out our BHA website for our strategic plan updates and news and info about our programs. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon. Are there any questions for either Ms. Price or Mr. Harmon about the BHA budget? Yes, Councilmember Sturbaum.
What's the difference between the cost center and administration?
The cost center is tasked with the management of the housing authority, so the separate programs like the Housing Choice Voucher Program, Public Housing Program are charged management fees, bookkeeping fees by the cost center for the management of the housing authority.
And that's local too, the cost center.
I'm sorry?
The cost center is a local
Yeah, we're all in the
operation
same
as well.
building.
Yes, yes.
Right. Okay, and what's single resident occupancy program? How does that, is that a different kind of housing that you're actually built and providing?
Yes, that's a separate contract that the Housing Authority has with HUD, separate from our regular voucher program. It's for 12 single-room occupancy units that we are contracted with Centerstone. It's located at 322 South Grant Street for 12 units that serve chronically homeless and disabled.
Right. So are you planning to expand that, or so you're sitting at 12? How does that?
It's been at 12 for quite some time, for a number of years. We would love to expand the program if HUD makes those funds available.
Okay. I think that's all, except that collection losses just means people didn't pay, right?
Correct.
Yes,
Okay, thanks.
you're welcome.
Councilmember Volin.
Can you tell us what is the comparison of our occupancy rates with other cities?
For public housing, 97% occupied is extremely well. Most housing authorities, the goal is to be at 98%, but most housing authorities across the state are probably around 95%.
So to what do you attribute us being at 97?
Need. The
I mean,
need for
there-
people to be in housing and apply for housing, yeah.
But we know there's need everywhere across the country. How can they be only at 95%? Like what's going wrong in the other cities, or we can do 2% better?
Well, I don't want to say what might be wrong at other housing
I don't want to
authorities.
put you on the spot. I just,
I know we work really hard at making sure that we get all of our vacant units occupied, and we make it a priority.
thank you.
Other questions? I have one. I assume since you're affiliated with the city of Bloomington, your lowest paid employees make at least the living wage, $13.21 for next year. Is that accurate?
I don't have that information. I certainly would assume so, yes.
Mr. McMillan or Mr. Kern, do you happen to know whether the BHA falls under the living wage ordinance?
Unfortunately, I do not know that. Jeff does not know
Okay.
that, but we can get an answer.
I do know that HUD has its own wage rate determination, and we cannot fall below those wage determinations, so they set certain positions at certain levels, and I do believe those are above the living wage rates.
Okay, great. Yeah, if we could just, if you could provide that information
Certainly.
later when we do the written questions, that'd be great. All right. If there are no other questions, we'll go to the public. Does anybody in the public want to make a comment about the Bloomington Housing Authority budget? Seeing none, come back to council. Any comments or a recommendation?
Move to pass? Did you have a comment?
All right, we'll start on my right. Oh, no, we have to do roll call. Pardon me. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll on, actually, this is one we do not vote upon. So, thank you. Ms. Bolden's facial expression filled me in that this is actually one we do not vote on. It was just, it was just for our information. So thank you so much for coming and for your presentation tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
We will move on to Housing and Neighborhood Development. Ms. Sims.
This would be a 20-minute presentation with 16 minutes of questions from council members.
Okay. Move the mic. Good evening. I am Doris Sims, the Director of the Housing and Neighborhood Development Department, and I will be presenting the 2020 budget for the Housing and Neighborhood Development Department, or as we go by the name of HAND. Why we exist. The Housing and Neighborhood Development Department's mission is to enhance the quality of life for Bloomington residents by developing programs, services, and partnerships with both public and private organizations to preserve community character, promote safe and affordable housing, and protect neighborhood vitality. We do this with a staff of 17 members, 6 compliance officers, 5 program managers, 3 housing specialists, 1 financial specialist, an assistant director, and a director. The department implements over 30 activities and programs and provides staff assistance to 4 boards and commissions: the Redevelopment Commission, the Historic Preservation Commission, the Board of Housing Quality Appeals, and the Citizens Advisory Committee, which allocates our annual Community Development Block Grant funds. Our program and activities are grouped into 5 categories: affordable housing, neighborhood and citizen involvement, Title 16 and Title 6 of the Bloomington Municipal Code, historic preservation, and our 3 federal grants that we received from the the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, Home Partnership Program, and Housing Counseling. So some of our goals that we've met up to date under our 2019 budget: under the area of affordable housing, to date we have assisted with the creation and retention of 197 units of affordable housing, utilizing both our federal home program and the city's housing development fund. Our program manager for neighborhoods has assisted with the start of 3 neighborhood associations: Covenanter, Winslow Farms, and Shadow Creek. And I'm happy to report that our compliance officers are using their iPads to complete rental inspection, as well as to complete doing Title VI complaints. So for my 2020 budget goals and requested funding, one of the important goals of Mayor Hamilton and the HAND Department is to work to increase the amount of affordable housing for all income levels within the Bloomington community. Our goals for 2020 include utilizing all available resources such as tax abatement, home funds, and the Housing Development Fund to create or maintain 100 units of affordable housing. We also will continue to monitor the over 800 units of affordable housing that has been added or maintained since Mayor Hamilton's began his administration. We will also be reporting to the mayor and the city council all new projects that will be funded under the Housing Development Fund by the end of quarter 3 of 2020. For 2020, we will continue to complete 3 neighborhood cleanups. And of those 3 cleanups, we will try to rid each neighborhood of 11 tons of trash and other waste. Next week begins our 21st class of Citizen Academy, and where our goal is to achieve 4.6 rating from the participants out of 5 of how well we're doing with our Citizens Academy class. As stated earlier, our compliance officers are utilizing iPads now to complete inspections. In 2020, we will turn our efforts to maximizing the efficiencies of rental inspections by decreasing the time it takes to complete inspections by 5%. We also will be looking to educate both tenants and landlords on smoke detector maintenance. Smoke detector violations is one of the highest violations found during rental inspections. Through this educational training, we hope to see a decline in violations by 15% in 2020. For 2020, the department will host 2 educational seminars on the rich history of Bloomington's homes and structures under historic preservation. We will also provide public education on the updated State Historical, Architectural, and Archaeological Research Data Survey, or commonly known as the SHARD, once it's approved by the City Council. Through mailings and neighborhood meetings, information will be provided on what the SHARD is and what properties are included on the SHARD survey. The department investigates and resolves citizen complaints under those sections of Title VI that, as it relates to tall grass, trash, and snow removal. Our goal for 2020 is to maintain an average response time of 3 days to address U-Report complaints and resolve 90% of the U-Report complaints that are valid. Under housing counseling, which is one of the 3 federal grants that we receive, the department provides one-on-one housing counseling in the areas of pre- and post-purchase, default and delinquency, and rental housing. The department also holds 4 classes per year for individuals and households looking to purchase their first home and to learn about the home buying experience. In 2020, we hope to have 55 households attend our home buyer classes and rate the class with an 8.3 out of 10 in satisfaction. We also look to provide 21 households with one-on-one counseling assistance. Under our Community Development Block Grant Social Service funding, we hope to fund 5 agencies $25,000 each and to monitor those agencies for federal compliance and the utilization of the federal dollars by May of 2020. Under the Community Development Block Grant Program Physical Improvement Funding, those funds can be used for housing rehabilitation, sidewalk and street improvements, storm drainage improvements in low-income neighborhoods in the city, and to assist nonprofit organizations with facility upgrades. In 2020, funds will be used to assist the Bloomington Housing Authority for the installation of handicap-accessible ramps to intersection within the Crestmont and Reverend Butler housing complexes. Funds will also be used to assist 4 nonprofit organizations to complete facility improvements and to assist 2 homeowners to rehabilitate their homes. Under the Home Partnership Program for 2020 that the city receives through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, the home grant can only be used for housing assistance. During 2020, the department would utilize the home grant to subsidize up to $50,000 per unit to develop 20 affordable rental units. Funding also will be provided to the Bloomington Housing Authority to fund housing for 1 year of 2 households that is on their Section 8 waiting list. Down payment and closing cost assistance will also be provided to 2 households to purchase their first home. And some of my budget highlights, under Category 1, the increase is the 2% increase for salaries for the hand department staff. Under Category 2, there's a slight decrease, and that decrease is in motor oil and fuel. And under Category 3, the request is a little over $1.6 million, and the largest increase is of $800,000 for the Housing Development Fund. Also, under Category 4, capital outlays, I am requesting $50,000 to purchase 2 new vehicles for 2 compliance officers. So here's an overview of our department budget. As I stated, the total budget, our total budget request for hand for 2020 is $2,766,725, an increase of 50% or $919,993 over our 2019 budget request, and that primary increase is due to fund the Housing Development Fund. I appreciate your consideration of our 2020 budget. I feel that our budget request aligns with our stated goals of affordable housing, neighborhood and citizens involvement, Title 16 rental inspection program, historic preservation, and Title 6 neighborhood compliance, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Yes.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sims. Councilmember Rallo, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Sims. I'm always impressed at the sheer amount of work that your department does, and it's growing every year. And part of the growth is the new, a lot of new affordable housing units, hundreds of them. And so I wonder about the need for inspectors. Is your staff? Is this a growing challenge for you in terms of your inspectors, considering, for instance, you have a biannual on-site monitoring of all new affordable housing, workforce housing units and affordable housing units as a goal? Is that? It must be challenging.
Thank you for that comment. So our inspectors inspect the rental units, and we have a database of over 22,000 rental units, and that's what their job is. However, currently the assistant director is the one who is doing the monitoring of all the workforce and affordable housing units that we currently have in our portfolio. We're analyzing how much time that takes as our portfolio continues to grow, and we see that maybe in the future we may need a person dedicated to just keeping track of all of that information.
Do you require any overtime right now?
Do I require any? I'm sorry.
Any overtime in order to fulfill the duties of inspection?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Councilmember Sturbaum.
Like personnel has been flat for 4 years. Is that right?
Yes.
And then other services, I think you explained that, but I didn't understand it. The
So
other
the housing
services budget got really big, and then just what was that about?
So the Housing Development Fund, and the way I understand it, and we have 2 people from the Controller's Office to correct me if I'm wrong, the Housing Development Funds are in what's called a non-reverting account, and in order for them to be expended on a project, they have to be appropriated. And so this takes the money out of the non-reverting fund and appropriate it into the hand department's budget so that it can be utilized to work with developers to build affordable housing.
So it's just passing through. Is that what you're saying? That money is just passing
What's
through
been
the hand
appropriated
budget?
to be able to be used.
Would I be wrong to say passing through the?
Well, you have to have it there first in order.
It gets
so
put
it's
in
not
and then it
passing
gets
through, it's-
spent. But
I'm sorry?
it gets put into your budget and then it gets spent,
Correct.
but it's directly passing through, as I said.
Okay.
Mixed
that's
nodding.
fine.
Okay. I understand. Didn't the state do something crazy and say we couldn't charge the same amount for inspections, or did I imagine that?
So there was a lawsuit done by another city, and not necessarily, but the state, but the lawsuit stated was that you could not charge more than $5 for a registration fee. If you're talking about the rental inspection program?
Yes.
For a registration fee. However, our legal department interprets it that we don't have a registration fee. We have a rental inspection program that we charge a fee for.
Right.
And that's the difference between the two.
It makes sense to me.
Me too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. Thanks for your report, Ms. Sims. Can you share with us, what is the trend for federal funding? And I know that's a challenge for many municipalities, but is it an up and down trend, or is it pretty much flat with federal funding? And I know there's several sources, but overall, are we getting more, losing?
So speaking from our end for our community development block grant and our home dollars that we receive from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, it's always a challenge because every year we're notified that there may be a possibility that those two grant funds are eliminated entirely. But luckily, we have members of Congress who feels that those two federal programs make a difference in communities, and so they fight against the administration every year to make sure that they're funded. But they have been relatively flat over the last couple of years, particularly our community development block grant has been decreasing. So, we try to do more with less like anyone else.
Okay, thank you. And one more question. One of the programs that your department does that I've always been impressed with, the home buyers class. And we talk about affordable housing or home purchasing, but a lot of folks that may be eligible at some point to do that don't have the basics in order to purchase a home. But specifically, once participants graduate or go through the class, then there's an opportunity for that class in order to help provide down payment on a home?
That's correct. As
Yeah,
long as they
and-
meet our federal income guidelines
Yes.
for that program, we can assist them with up to $10,000 of down payment and closing cost assistance. We increased that a year ago from $5,000 because what we saw is the housing costs are continuing to increase and people need more financial assistance in buying homes.
Okay, and my direct question is, where does that money, how is that funded?
U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development through our CDBG and home programs.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I have a couple of questions. The memo for our budget packet spoke about conducting, let's see, which category was this? This was in affordable housing. It talks about conduct biannual on-site monitoring by Q4 of all dedicated workforce units not monitored in 2019. So that would seem to imply that they are only monitored once every 2 years, is that correct? And why
Yes,
is
so
that?
they're monitored initially when they come online. As I stated earlier, that's done by our Assistant Director, Eric Sater. So he meets with the actual housing manager on site. He explains the requirements of our workforce housing program. He goes back then later and reviews the documentation, and then they can send the documentation in annually, but we only go on site every other year.
So documentation is required annually,
Correct.
but the on-site verification of leases and things like that.
Is done every other year.
So can you tell me a little more about what they have to file annually? Is there I just want to have an assurance that there are indeed workforce qualified, income qualified people living in those units every year, not just every other year.
And I understand. So what we are asking them to provide is the type of documentation that they reviewed to determine that the tenant met our income guidelines. It's the similar requirements that we require under our home program when we provide home funding for rental units that are subsidized through our home program.
Okay, so you do require some kind of evidence that the individuals living in those workforce units do qualify.
And they meet the income guidelines of our workforce housing program.
So what does Mr. Sater then do additionally in the times when he visits the site?
So to actually see, you sent the documentation, but to review the leases, to make sure that they have valid leases, to make sure that they actually do have a file that contains the information that they actually sent us on the tenants.
And does he also make sure they didn't stick them all next to the dumpster or something like that?
Well, we don't go in the units.
So you don't actually go into the units?
No,
It's a matter of paperwork and making sure
Right.
that that is all meeting the
order.
requirements?
Right.
Okay. But I know that when we give such support for workforce housing, we specify they can't all be lumped together in one area.
That is correct.
Okay. Other questions for Ms. Sims? Yes, Councilmember Rallo.
Thank you. I think you mentioned earlier that CDBG funds have either been falling or static for a number of
Correct.
years. We've been trying to compensate with Jack Hopkins. Do you find that there is, where do you, what's your view of the need relative to funding?
As it relates to social service funding?
Yes.
So under social service funding, under CDBG, we can only use 50% of the grant. So that, as our CDBG amount falls or remains stagnant, the amount we can provide remains stagnant as well. And so the maximum this year is like $125,000. And usually most agencies come in and apply for $25,000, which means that there's only 4 or 5, and like this year, only 5 agencies that we can fund. So what we found is that what we direct some agencies who may not be able to get funded under CDBG is to apply for Jack Hopkins, because our funding cycle usually ends in February, and Jack Hopkins' funding cycle doesn't start until April. And Jack Hopkins right now, as you know, it's probably twice as much funding available under Jack Hopkins as it is under CDBG social service funding. And we administer those funds for the council, so we have an idea of, what is available to different social service agents to apply for funding.
Yeah, I just wonder about your view about demand relative to funding.
Well, there's
Is it
always a
growing?
demand.
Yes, I know the demand is always exceeding, but is it exceeding faster than funding is
I think
made
the
available?
big difference between the two funding sources is that CDBG, we allow agencies to use the funding for administrative costs to pay for salaries, whereas Jack Hopkins doesn't allow that as much. They're more looking for direct program activity cost. And so I think that is the challenge that most social service agencies in our community have, is that they may have great programs, but no one wants to pay for staff to do those programs.
Yeah, I see. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I have one more question. How much income has there been so far in 2019 into the Housing Development Fund?
So currently we have, and I don't have that numbered, I can give you an exact number, but I can tell you that the income that is going into that, we've had one loan that is closed and are making payments back. So I would say that those payments are coming in at about $1,200 a month in repayments.
Have we gotten any significant contributions through negotiation with developers so far this year?
No, we're in the process. We've talked to one developer. We have one project that, if I'm not mistaken, is before the Land Use Committee that has made a commitment for a contribution to the Housing Development Fund, and that will be the first one this year.
So the $800,000 that is being appropriated for 2020, where does most of that come from?
It came from the original $1.4 million in the fund because, as I stated earlier in answering Councilmember Sturban's question, what happens is the funds have to be appropriated within our budget, but sometimes a project may come for funding and it's approved in 1 year, but they may not start construction until the next year. A good example of that is Crescent Road. They were granted $500,000 out of the Housing Development Fund back in 2018. However, they're just now starting to build that project this year in 2019. And if you recall, earlier this year, we had to come back to the City Council to appropriate an additional $250,000 of that money because it was not in our budget for them based on our 2019 allocation of housing development funds.
So, and if you don't have this here, we can get it answered later, but of the original $1.4 million, do you know how much is left?
I would say probably about, and what with the Housing Development Fund, I would say probably about $800,000. That's why all of it's being allocated.
2 minutes.
Okay, well, that would make sense then. But it also points to the fact we need to find some other sources. Thank you. Councilmember Sturbaum.
Yeah, there's been talk about how TIF money can be used for this, but not this and this. I don't know if this is a good time to ask, but maybe staff could describe that just a little bit. I mean, can it be used for transportation? Probably not for affordable housing, probably for infrastructure. Do we know the walls, are they clear? Are they defined? Because there's just a big, broad question.
Well, that's not a question appropriate for me.
It may not be the right time to ask it.
I do know that it can be used for housing. In fact, the state legislators passed new legislation that in the hand department, we are currently looking at, that you can actually do a separate housing TIF, and it's based upon how many housing starts, if they're less than 1%, based on your population size within the last couple years, then you can create a housing TIF. So we're currently looking at it internally. I'm kind of announcing it tonight without telling the mayor about it, but that's one of the things that we're looking to and see if we can be able to do that here in Bloomington and then make a proposal to the mayor.
Good deal, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, are there any other questions from council members? Seeing none, we'll go to the public. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment on the Housing and Neighborhood Development budget? Please step on up, and I think, is there a sign-in sheet, Madam Clerk?
There's not a sign-in sheet. That
Okay.
means I'm not supposed to do this, right?
Well, just state your name for the record.
Hi,
then.
I'm Ron Smith, and at this point, I work for Area 10, and Area 10 works with a lot of individuals who are low income. And so it's very important, I think, that we support the hand department. And I think it's one of the best departments in the city. It provides boots on the ground for people to have a place to stay. It also provides them some ways to leave poverty with housing self-sufficiency. And I was involved in a little bit of the neighborhood cleanups. And I can't tell you how happy everybody was to bring things out to the dumpsters and to trade with some of the exchanges for reusable items. So I just want to encourage you to be very supportive of the hand department. And it is one of the ways that affordable housing is going to be mostly affected by some subsidy. So I just wanted to make sure I voiced that because I really do believe in it, and it does a lot of good work. So thank you.
Thank you. And now there is a sign-up sheet right there, next to Mr. Curran, if you would put your name there. Anybody else want to comment on the Housing and Neighborhood Development budget? Seeing none, we come back to council members. Are there any comments from council members at this stage? Yes, Councilmember Sturbaum?
Yes, the way that the homeowner assistance helps people get homes, that's huge. And I'm really pleased to hear the down payment assistance is up to $10,000 because 5 just wasn't really making a difference. And we want to have as many people have that opportunity to own as they can. And it's a great way to get out of poverty, to own a house, acquire it over time, have it when you retire. And we wish that for as many people as possible. And HAND really works there, and they do a lot of work in the neighborhoods, a lot of good work in the community, and it's really kind of where we all live that this HAND department touches. So thanks for that good work, always. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council member comments? Councilmember Rallo.
Well, I'd like to echo what Mr. Smith said. I think this is a very crucial department, and as population grows and needs grow, I think we need to pay attention to near-term addition of neighborhood compliance or program manager personnel for the department. I think that's probably a given. Also wanted to just say personally thanks to Ms. Sims for her work with constituents of District 4, particularly Title VI, property maintenance. There's been a lot of challenging issues, and she is always willing to meet and work and bring residents into compliance, hopefully without penalty. And she extends the means to do that. So I really appreciate her work, because she's willing to go through extraordinary efforts to make sure that people are in compliance and that it's not punitive. So it's a situation, I think, that needs attention. We should pay attention to whether or not this department should have more personnel. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or a motion?
Recommend you pass?
Second.
All right, we have a recommendation and a second. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Ruff,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Sturbaum. Yes. Sandberg.
Yes.
Thank you.
And that do pass recommendation gets a vote of 7-0. And we're now ready for economic and sustainable development.
This will be a 15-minute presentation, followed by up to 12 minutes of questions from council members.
Good evening, council members. I'm Alex Crowley, Director of Economic and Sustainable Development. Thank you for your time and attention today. And good evening to the public attending and watching the meetings on CATS. I welcome the opportunity to provide you a brief overview of our department's proposed 2020 budget. The Department of Economic and Sustainable Development consists of a small but very productive team that delivers a wide-ranging portfolio of activities. Department staff includes Brian Payne, Assistant Director for Small Business Development. It's with great excitement and some regret that I share with you that Brian will be leaving the department next month to become Executive Director for CDFI Friendly Bloomington, a terrific opportunity for him and an important step for this new and vital community organization. Lauren Travis, Assistant Director for Sustainability and a recent addition to the team. Sean Starowitz, Assistant Director for the Arts, who's led the city's arts and culture efforts for more than 3 years. In addition, our department includes Laurel Waters, who manages our customer service and accounting, and Rachel Byer, our newly installed 3-year U.S. Department of Agriculture co-funded grant position. We're also fortunate to have IU fellows and interns contributing to our work. Our department is lean and productive, consisting of 8.3 full-time equivalent and highly capable individuals, and our work aligns with key administration priorities, which include stimulating Bloomington's job and wage growth and workforce development and supporting affordable housing efforts, strengthening the city's sustainability efforts, and positioning the community to anticipate and mitigate the impacts of climate change, and maintaining and growing the city's arts and culture vibrancy. You may think of these in combination as our community's quality of life. And our success as a department stems in no small part from our ability to leverage support from for our priorities by partnering with public, private, and community organizations. The department's mission is to cultivate a resilient community built on shared prosperity, economic opportunity, environmental stewardship, and a thriving arts and culture ecosystem. And because of the community's longstanding commitment to invest in our quality of life, Bloomington is a wonderful place to live and work for many of us. But it bears recognizing that not all of our neighbors share in those benefits. A significant number of our residents struggle with access to food and affordable housing, remain unable to find meaningful work, or are suffering from wage stagnation, are having difficulty addressing their health needs, are disproportionately at risk of being affected by climate change, and are challenged by many other things. And so we continue to recognize that we have a lot of work left to do to improve the city's quality of life for all, and we intend to pursue that work vigorously in 2020 and beyond. With this in mind, let me highlight some selected 2019 activities we've undertaken and some 2020 activities we intend to pursue with the approval of this budget request. I'll begin with a sample of our 2019 sustainability activities. To address the crucially important issue of climate change and adaptation, we are completing a community-wide and local government operations greenhouse gas inventory in collaboration with IU's Environmental Resilience Institute. This is an important project that puts the city in a position to make tangible advances towards greenhouse gas reduction and climate preparedness now and in the future. We're continuing to support the innovative Solarize Bloomington program, the city's residential and small business solar group purchasing program, in collaboration with Siren, which is the Southern Indiana Renewable Energy Network. And we're releasing a request for proposal for the city's first climate vulnerability assessment, the first step in a multi-year process. In the area of energy and the built environment, we've expanded the city's solar capacity to the mill, and we'll be adding more on the 2 new garages which are scheduled to open at the end of 2020. In the realm of transportation, we've established a pilot Zipcar program at Bryan Park to evaluate car share opportunities in the city. Regarding expanding access to locally grown food, we hired and have launched the USDA grant-funded Local Food Coordinator to more effectively connect local growers with local buyers. And we're developing a healthy food access survey in partnership with the Bloomington Food Policy Council, focused especially on underserved areas. Addressing waste reduction, we've expanded the city's composting sites at city facilities and are providing logistical and personnel support to Hoosier, which, if I may shamelessly promote it, will be on Saturday, August 24th at the warehouse near Switchard Park. And finally, we were pleased to achieve LEED Gold certification for City Hall and to have been chosen as one of 15 cities in the first cohort of the Green Building Council's inaugural LEED for Cities program. Thank you. Pivoting to our 2020 activities, broadly described in italics here, we will continue and build on our 2019 activities. At the city operations level, we will create a renewable energy goal. As the mayor mentioned in his opening remarks, we want to establish a goal that will push us while being attainable in a real and measurable way. We will also establish methodologies for waste generation and diversion reporting and sustainable purchasing practice compliance. Our local food access efforts will will continue to focus on mapping and connecting the local grower and buyer communities to drive increased purchasing of locally grown food. Our climate change and adaptation efforts will leverage the greenhouse gas inventory project underway now to advance renewable energy options, including continuing to look for expansion opportunities for city and community solar capacity, and we will complete the climate vulnerability assessment, which will be a significant undertaking. We will also develop educational programs for energy efficiency and sustainable building practices. Our transportation efforts will include a focus on electric vehicle education and infrastructure, an opportunity we feel can hit a tipping point with city leadership. We will also be heavily involved in implementing programs associated with the transportation demand management planning, which is currently underway, with a heavy emphasis on increasing utilization in public transit. In the area of waste diversion, we will continue to work with Sustain IU and the community to strengthen the Hoosier to Hoosier program, which diverted 80 tons of waste from the landfill last year alone, and approximately 400 tons since its start in 2010. Part of our work will seek to structurally extend that program more substantially off campus. We will also expand composting. And finally, a little fun. We will lead the programming to celebrate Earth Day 2020 to recognize the 50th anniversary of that event. As you can see, there's a lot going on in sustainability. We're confident the team can execute well against these goals and expect our requested special projects manager position will be heavily involved to support the efforts. Moving to arts and culture, in 2019, we've accomplished a number of significant projects and are in the process of completing others. Here's a sample. We completed the BEAD strategic plan, which will guide the Arts District through 2021, and we rolled out the plan to community stakeholders at the BEAD Summit. We developed and launched a new BEAD brand, The new logo is pictured here and can be seen on banners and storefronts throughout the downtown. The new BEAD brand and tagline is more inclusive and supports broader arts and culture activities. We're currently developing a public art maintenance program. We're in the process of completing an arts space needs assessment for the community. We launched the Arts Capital Investment Program with CDFI-friendly Bloomington to help undercapitalized artists gain access to capital-heavy public art projects, and have continued to support new and emerging community festivals, including Blackie Brown and others. In 2019, we're implementing several significant 1% for the Arts projects, including installations in the Trades District, Switchyard Park, and are planning installations for the 2 new garages. We're collaborating with the Columbus Museum of Art and Design, the Columbus Area Arts Council, and the Indianapolis Contemporary on a regional exhibition exchange. This Indiana Arts Commission program is the first of its kind in the state. And finally, we've updated and expanded the Bloomington Arts Commission grant program, and we thank you for your support for the increase in arts funding in 2019 and beyond. In 2020, our activities, as summarized in italics, will include curating the BEAD by increasing awareness and participation in the district and expanding its reach to a regional audience. Adopting the public art maintenance plan we're currently developing, including establishing an endowment for ongoing maintenance funding, developing recommendations and strategies based on the art space needs assessment, further leveraging the Bloomington Arts Commission and Bloomington Urban Enterprise Association grant programs to cultivate and support newer community organizations, and implement revised guidelines for the 1% for the Arts program to improve its effectiveness and management. I should note these arts and culture activities are all in addition to the significant management efforts associated with the growing inventory of existing public art installations, cultural events, and festivals that make our community the vibrant arts and culture center it is today. I will now shift to business relations and major project development activities, starting with an update on 2019 goals. We're developing a formal relationship management tool to help us manage the more than 500 organizational contacts we have each year. We've continued our support for the Mill, and this, its first full year of operations, which include a growing number of workshops and programs. We regularly connect new residents to job opportunities in the community using the Bloomington Connect networking pilot project, and are simplifying and streamlining the business license application process. A significant undertaking is currently underway in collaboration with the Bloomington Economic Development Corporation and other stakeholder groups in the community to develop a comprehensive economic development strategy. This will help us all better align resources to improve wages, workforce development, and job growth. We continue to negotiate with developers to help the community on the crucially important issue of affordable housing, an issue that impacts our ability to retain and grow jobs. We've listed the Kiln building and the Showers Administration building for sale in the Trades District to help activate the district as a job center. And we officially completed the Trades District infrastructure build-out in May of this year and are now formally marketing the lots for private development. In 2020, our business development activities will continue to make economic vitality a priority for the administration. A sample of our activities in 2020 include finalizing and implementing the recommendations of a business retention and expansion plan, structurally improving early childhood education in the community by evaluating and implementing, if appropriate, a shared services program in collaboration with the Community Foundation to help centers operate more efficiently, with the goal of increasing wages in that critical sector. We will also create and deploy a public online database of economic development and other grant funding opportunities, streamline and fully automate the business licensing process to increase transparency and access for applicants, sell at least one RDC-owned lot in the vicinity of Switchyard Park for private development to include no less than 50 units of affordable housing, and develop and implement one significant program to drive wage growth. Our plans also include selling 2 lots in the Trades District for private development to substantially include office space for tech and innovation tenants or owners, supporting the completion and opening of the 4th Street and Trades District garages by the end of next year, facilitating at least $5 million in committed Community Development Financial Institution, or CDFI, funding in the Bloomington area, And as the mayor mentioned in his opening remarks, we will formally review the 2016 Wage Growth Task Force goals and reconvene community stakeholders to develop a plan for additional activities. Our 2020 budget request is $996,451, which represents approximately $47,000 or 5% increase over 2019. In the interest of time, and because you have details in your packet, I will summarize the changes as follows. Our personnel costs represent approximately 55% of the total budget. The 26% increase in year-over-year Category 1 personnel expenses is the combination of a new special projects manager, shifting some USDA grant expenses to that category from another one, including the healthcare costs, and standard staff salary increases. This increase in Category 1 is partially offset by a decrease of approximately $69,000 or 14% in Category 3, other services and charges. The shifting of costs associated with the USDA grant, the elimination of a one-time 2019 costs, and a handful of other changes are the costs for that decrease. In conclusion, the department's 2020 budget request reflects the administration's focus on stimulating wage growth and economic opportunity, on sustainability and climate change resiliency, and on expanding the cultural vibrancy of the city. Thank you for your consideration. I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. Council member questions? Councilmember Rollo?
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. I appreciate your presentation and your efforts. I want to focus on climate change and what is a commitment of 26 to 28% reduction of emissions below 2005 levels within the next 5 years. Pretty challenging, I would say. And we could say we're about 13% along the way, but that's a reflection of a shift in natural gas use instead of coal. So I'm very supportive of the carbon emissions report, but there's going to have to be funds set aside to achieve this goal. And my question is actually following on a suggestion that I thought was very good by Councilmember Piedmont Smith the other day, that we probably need personnel directed, a person directed toward this with this charge in mind to achieve our goals. Because you have a small department, you have a lot to do. I think that this is such a priority that I think that we need to consider adding someone whose explicit job is to focus on emissions reduction. And I wondered, could you reflect on that?
It is a huge challenge for the community. It's a huge need. I think one of our, no doubt, the attention of someone entirely dedicated to it would help a lot. So I think it's worth considering. I think another way to look at it also is that we all have to do it, right? And so the value of having one person, would be only successful if the organization as a whole, gets behind the effort. If that's the case, then then you might make an argument that in fact, everybody's in on it, and you don't necessarily have to do that. But obviously having one person focused on one task like that is definitely worth considering.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Other questions from council members? Councilmember Sturbaum?
Yeah, just summarize what is all in the 420,000 other services category.
So it's a variety of stuff. Let me open it up for you. So the broad categories that fall under that, you're talking about category 3.
Right.
Are instruction, management fees, postage, travel, printing, advertising, dues and subscriptions, temporary contractual employees, grants, the mayor's promotion of business, and then a sort of catch-all other category. The majority of the costs associated with that are really coming from grants, the grants bucket, which accounts for about $247,000 of that.
From what budget did you say?
This is grants.
Oh, grants, yeah.
So what you'll find in there are the organizations that we help to support, the Chamber, the BEDC, some of the other grants that we do, the arts grants. And,
Right, consultants would fall in that.
consultants fall under management. There's a management fee in consultants and workshops.
Okay, just want to know. Thanks.
Other questions from council members? Councilmember Sims?
Thank you for your report, Alex. I think you've heard from many of us up here are concerned with moving forward with some climate change and emission control and that sort of thing. And I tend to agree that we might need a dedicated person in your department. How we fund all that, that's another discussion, but that makes sense. But I guess what I'd like to ask is, do you now or your department or will that person, what are your expectations from an outreach standpoint? And what I'm getting at is pretty obvious that the city can only do so much. And without working with others in order to reduce some things and then educate others, I don't want to say it's for naught, but it won't be near as productive as it could. So does your department, or that you're aware of, do we have outreach programs working with other entities and companies? And
Yeah, so that's a great question.
Yeah.
We have great community partners. We have the partnership with Sustain IU. We have the partnership with Siren, which I was mentioning, the Solarize project, the Monroe County Energy Challenge, which is a group of volunteers. They're out there. The Chamber has taken a significant recent interest in sustainability and sustainability issues. So BDC as well. There are a lot of great partners out there, and so no way could we do our work without those partnerships. And not only do they help amplify any messaging that we're putting out to their memberships or to their constituencies, but they're actually in some cases doing a lot of the work. So Solarize Bloomington, the heavy lifting on that these days is really is Siren. We are kind of a co-sponsor of it. We do provide some support, but really they're doing a lot of the heavy lifting. So yes, I think we do have good connections with groups in the community. Certainly, always trying to strengthen those and grow those. But there'd be no way to do what we're doing without that.
Do you see that expanding somehow? And I'm thinking more in particular with individual community members. I think we can do a whole lot, and I know many have solarized their houses and did some other things and getting more efficient vehicles. But I'm looking at an all-encompassing approach, and we can do certain things, but it's like us end users, I think.
Yeah.
And so
I think there are parts of the community that are not being reached by some of the important messages related to climate change. I think that there are, we've been discussing it, there's a whole bunch of engaged people, and then there's a whole bunch of people who are not engaged. And I think the more we can do things to go out to them, the better. We do have a plan that and it's a very specific plan, but it's, we're looking to try to diversify the people who are on BCOS, for example, and go to parts of the community that aren't necessarily thinking that they have a role in that, and so we're going to be making a much more concerted effort to do that, in anticipation of some of the vacancies that may pop up, because again, I think that there are whole populations that are not engaged.
I agree. Thank you.
All right, I have a few questions. In the memo that you submitted with the budget, in the sustainability portion of your goals for next year, you have a few that are very vague. So you have evaluate the viability of creating a renewable energy goal for city operations by the end of Q2. Evaluate the viability of creating a goal. Why is that so cautious?
Well, you may have noticed that I changed the language in my presentation.
You changed it verbally, but not written.
It was written as well to just establish a goal. So I think, you know, at first we're trying to figure out, you know, how to go about doing it. We want to be deliberate about it. You know, as I think I'd mentioned that we don't want to, there are communities that have set goals that, you know, who knows how they're going to get there. And I think they don't have teeth. And one of the things about the Sustainability Action Plan, one of the things that we're doing right now in terms of all the reporting we're doing is that we really want to set a very solid baseline. We want to understand what's going on. Lead for Cities is going to be great for that. It's helping us, you know, across a whole swath of sustainability-related issues to really document, figure out where we are, and then set that goal. So I think I was probably a little hesitant in the memo, but you know, our plan is to do that next year.
Well, that's good to hear. The other very hesitant statement, and there were statements that were repeated more than once, so it was a little bit redundant. Another one that I wonder about is evaluate development of a goal for increasing access to healthy local food by the end of Q3. Evaluate the development of a goal. Once again, why not just do it?
Well, you have to be able to measure it. And so I think before you commit to doing something, you know, you have to know that you can measure, and and we're right now in the midst of that, right? And trying to figure out what are the mechanisms that, like, what data is out there, how do we tap it, is it easy to get, is it hard to get, what are the processes for getting it? And then I think once you establish that, then you become much more able to set goals off of it. But I think it's a little reckless, you know, to set a goal without knowing how we're even going to measure it. So
Do you stick with the hazier language on that particular one?
Well, we're in the process of doing it. I think by the end of the year, we're going to have a much better idea. Our value chain coordinator, Rachel, joined us in the late spring. So she's been hard at work. She's out there, you know, beating the pavement, trying to understand, meeting with buyers to try to understand, you know, their metrics. And, I think we will, by the end of the year, have a much better idea of that. I like to undercommit and overperform, and so I think we just want to make sure we know what we're doing.
Another question in relation to energy in the built environment. It says one of your goals will be to develop a pilot program with Monroe County Energy Challenge to improve residential and commercial energy use efficiency. Don't we already have a program with the Monroe County Energy Challenge? I mean, we've had that for 2 years now. How is this different?
Well, so the Energy Challenge, if you remember, was formed around the Georgetown project, which then kind of like disintegrated.
Well, we just didn't get it, but.
Well, they never, the reporting never even, it was just this sort of weird thing. So but the group was strong enough and the efforts were strong enough, but they had a whole variety of different things that they were doing. They were doing educational programs, they were doing, energy efficiency, there were a whole bunch of things. When that Georgetown element stopped, and with the Energy Challenge kind of deciding to continue, they've spent some time trying to figure out what's the best use of their time and their configuration of people. And they zeroed in on this idea of we can actually, as a group, go and implement a very specific program for example, small business energy efficiency. And they've been working on that. They actually just did a pilot of a restaurant visit recently to try to understand exactly what it is that a restaurant would need, where the opportunities are. So they're building themselves up to it. I think that we could really leverage that and make it structural, make it a real program, tie in with some of the other organizations, maybe like the Chamber, and then really dispatch this program through that organization in 2020.
So it's kind of a reorganization,
Figuring of their mission to some extent. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The parliamentarian tells me we are out of time for this section, but I would ask that we add a few more minutes.
We call for a voice vote. All in favor of continuing 5 more minutes on this topic, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Let me continue.
All right, thank you. I wanted to ask Well, let me open it to my colleagues first before I take another question. Any other questions from my colleagues? Okay, seeing none. The new project coordinator, can you talk a little bit more about what that person would do and who's going to set that person's priorities?
So we've had actually some contract help in the last year or so that has been able to, is sort of a utility player that is able to go in and jump on a project and execute it. Put their attention on something that is just one thing too many more than what we can handle, and especially if there's a time sensitivity to it, jump on that and execute that project. I see this role as that primarily on staff. There's a ton of stuff going on, as you can see. But as I look at the landscape, we're actually going to be doing a kind of staffing roles and responsibility session next week. But as I look at just the sheer volume of activities and what they're going to fall to, I expect that this role will have probably the majority of their time focused on issues associated with the sustainability function in our department with Lauren. So, I think in terms of management of the person, the jury's out. I'm not sure exactly how we're going to do that just yet, but we'll know that shortly. That person will either report directly to me, or in some sort of dotted line reporting to the person who owns the area of specialization for which they are doing the project that they're doing.
Thank you. I'll just ask one more, and then we can go to the public. The partnership with Siren and the Bloomington Solar for All, Solarize Bloomington. I know that they have a nonprofit that is now helping people with lower incomes to get solar panels installed in exchange for some sweat equity. But I think that we're still not reaching many people who would be interested in solar, but just have written it off as too expensive an investment. Has your department considered a more active support financially? You say you have a grant line, you support the Chamber, the BDC, and others. Would there be a possibility, or have you looked into either low-interest loans or grants for people who want to do residential solar?
Yeah, we have. A great way to do it is through CDFIs. CDFIs, as you know, are community financial institutions that have more of a mission, sort of public good mission than a pure profit mission. And there are CDFIs that focus on renewable energy. And so CDFIs don't give money, they're not granting, but they're loaning money. And so if, in the world of loans, we've considered that avenue and with CDFI Friendly Bloomington in place, which is designed to attract external capital to Bloomington. We have an opportunity to really cultivate that and figure out if there's a way to package something together, kind of like what we've done for the Artists Capital Fund, which is kind of small scale stuff, but in that case, it's artists who don't have the money to be able to front load their capital costs into a public art project. So I think that there are avenues like that. We have not considered just granting money. Maybe we should consider that. And I agree with you. I think there are a lot of people who are primed for solar and would benefit from solar, and there isn't enough in the funding to support their need.
All right, thank you. Last call for my colleagues to ask questions. All right, seeing none, we will go to the public. If any member of the public would like to comment on the budget for the Economic and Sustainable Development Department, please come up, state your name, and there is a sign-up sheet now as well. Please
5 minutes per person.
Please write your name after your comments so that we can just keep things flowing here.
Good evening. My name is Ross Martini-Eiler. I'm a member of the Bloomington Catholic Worker. Thank you all for your public service and for your good hearts. My concerns are also about, and thank you for your presentation and the good work your department does. My concern is also about climate change. This body, the council, through the YES resolution last year, and our mayor has committed to helping Indiana meet the goal of being at a 50% reduction of greenhouse emissions by 2030 and net zero by 2050. That's a huge goal, and there's huge work to avoid the real catastrophic consequences of climate change. And that's for the state of Indiana. If the state of Indiana is to get to net zero by 2050, Bloomington needs to get there way before Anderson and Muncie and Kokomo. We have to be leaders. We have to be brave and moral leaders in the area of climate change. And what I have seen in this budget is a continuance of business as usual and trying to find some small piecemeal things that are doing good and are helping, but are not part of the large-scale economic transformation that is the true challenge before us to meet the moral issue of climate change. I think you very wisely said that I think the idea of a director-level position of director of climate action would be an excellent move for the city of Bloomington, but it has to be everything. It has to be every department in our city. It has to be every budget line. It has to be every line item moving in sync in order to really provide good moral leadership on this issue. I think we just need, I wish your budget was much bigger. I think we need more sustainability officers than police officers. And this is not a diss on police officers, but we need an army of people who are working together to make this a reality. If the goal of 50% reductions by 2030 isn't an empty promise, if there's real teeth or interest in this body to move us in that direction, the budget needs to be much more radically restructured than it was in this budget cycle. I don't think the city is looking to you for moral leadership on this issue. I don't see how we can have brave moral leadership and continue to pay for more parking operations without a plan to get to net zero. I don't see how we can have brave moral leadership on this issue and with a comprehensive economic development strategy if we don't have a comprehensive greenhouse gas emission strategy. I just encourage this body to think more radically, more creatively, and next year at this time, not to endorse or accept any budget that is not radically restructured to the reality of the emergency of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martini-Eiler. Did you sign in, Mr. Eiler?
Hi, my name's Daniel Bingham, and I'm going to echo many of Ross's comments. There is no greater challenge, nothing more important before us, no greater threat to our safety than climate change. If we don't hit the goals laid out by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, 50% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2030, then we face catastrophic consequences. The Department of Economic and Sustainable Development, in that name, economics comes first. It is natural that it comes first in its policy as well. All due respect to Director Crowley, who does a fantastic job on the economic side of it, his expertise and interest is not on the sustainability side of it. As long as sustainability is in that department and subservient to economics in that way, we will not be able to truly coordinate around this issue the way we need to. You can argue everything else we do, economic development, arts development, policing, none of it will matter. In a very real sense, none of it will matter if we don't get this right. If we do not respond to this challenge, it undermines the underpinnings of society. There's going to be no one left to make art, no one left to engage in economics, no one left to police if we don't get this right. We need a department dedicated to this challenge. We need people full-time, not just one person. We need multiple people full-time researching how we as a city can hit these goals. And we need a commitment to these goals that isn't couched in under committing and overperforming. We need a commitment to these goals that says we will hit these goals whatever it takes, because it is about survival. And Bloomington, like Ross said, we should be leading the way. We can't afford to be lazy on this, to follow others, because most of Indiana is going to be slow on the uptake on this one. Much of Indiana still needs to be convinced this is a real challenge. We know it's a real challenge, so we need to push that much harder and go that much further to make up for their slowness. This should be an entire department. That department should be committing to a net zero by 2050 plan, should be committing to a plan to make 50% cuts by 2030. We should be putting big programs in place on the scale of or larger than our affordable housing fund. We need to be pumping money into this challenge. We put 6 megawatts of solar on the grid in the last 4 years. In the next 10, we need 400. We don't have to do that alone, but we need to be doing a big part of that. We need to be ramping up in a huge way. And that's just grid electricity. We need to cut natural gas use. We need to cut driving and the emissions that come from it. Meanwhile, the Economic Sustainable Development Department was pushing a garage. We need a department that is going to be pushing back against the economics people when they say, we want a garage, saying, here's the carbon impact of that. Here's what that costs our community in terms of hitting our goals. And that needs to be on an equal level. Or, if anything, economics should be subservient to sustainability right now. Because if we don't get the sustainability right, there's going to be no one left to do economics. We have to treat this like we treat the budget. Only we're deep, deep, deep in debt, and the creditors are coming calling. Sustainability needs to be its own department, and I would urge that you on the council push back on the administration until they start taking this with adequate seriousness. Thank you.
Hi, Kate Rosenberger. So as those before me have said, this budget does not go far enough at all, and it doesn't do our part whatsoever to stop climate change or to do our part to stop climate change. Climate action and sustainability should not be part of a department, and especially not part of a department that doesn't do it justice. Climate change and sustainability deserves its own department. And it's true, we don't know if we can reach net zero emissions by 2050, but the thing is, no one does. And guess what? No one knew if we could go to the moon either, but we set priorities and we set goals and we did it. I've heard it so many times that we should be doing more. Of course, I agree with that. But this budget is the status quo. This budget is business as usual. And it's so true that we have the obligation and the opportunity to be a leading Midwest city in fighting climate change, but right now we aren't even first in our red state. So I say, let's be forward-thinking. Let's do what is difficult, but what is right for future generations, and create a budget here that really prioritizes climate action and sustainability. Thanks.
Is there any other member in the public who would like to comment on the budget of Economic and Sustainable Development? Going once? Going twice? All right, thank you. We'll come back to council members for comment. Councilmember Rollo.
Thank you. I think that this department does very good work, first of all, and I applaud them with what they've accomplished in the last few years. I think it's extraordinary, and they're very serious and dedicated. But I did want to reflect on climate because we're all aware that it is a true priority. It's quite a challenge as well. So in order to meet the goal of 26 to 28% reduction below 2005 levels as per the Paris Agreement, and if we're 13% on the way, we've got about 15% to do in the next 5 years. So it seems incumbent on us to have every year a reporting of 3% reduction in carbon emissions. So that should be an assumption that we should all go on. How do we get there? It's going to be a tall order. I think that we ought to explore, as we grow as a community, we're going to have to concurrently reduce carbon emissions, which is going to be even more challenging. So the idea of carbon concurrency, I think, is something I've been pushing, which is the idea of that for every expansion of the local economy, we're going to have to recognize that and offset that by sequestration or efficiency or substitution or some means. There was a study done in June, which was in the journal Science, which proposed that planting 1 trillion trees planet-wide could basically absorb our carbon emissions. That's about 133 trees per person. That's an enormous number of trees. If we were to do 10% of that, that would be an enormous challenge for us. But I think that sequestration is a possibility, and it's something that maybe Parks and Recreation should consider. But this would be an easy way to go, relatively, if we have the land space to do it, if we can encourage people in the community to plant trees and so forth. I like the idea of wedding an economic development strategy with a climate mitigation strategy. It has to recognize the fact that we have to, at the same time that we have to reduce carbon emissions, we have to protect our local economy. That's why I supported a downtown garage, to prevent sprawl, because sprawl increases carbon emissions. Yes, I don't like a parking garage per se, but keeping things local, keeping things compact is very important for us as a community to prevent sprawl, which is the most carbon-intensive way to develop, a community. Lastly, I just want to talk about an adaptation strategy, which Mr. Crowley has talked about, which is a local food economy. To the extent that we can substitute imports, we reduce the transportation costs, we reduce, if we can grow, I'm talking about local food in this case. If we can grow local food, we can offset imports and we can offset all the energy that goes in to that production of food. Obviously, everybody needs food. We have a potential of $50 to $100 million, it seems to me, if it's only 10% of food consumption in Monroe County, it represents at least $50 million of local economic activity. So there's an upside to reducing carbon emissions. And I think the Economic and Sustainable Development Department is going to have to spearhead that. And I'm glad they're doing that now. So anyway, just want to leave with the idea that we're going to reduce by 3% per year. Next August, we're going to have to sit here and talk about the emissions report and whether we're on that track, because it's very, very important. Thank you.
Other council member comments? Councilmember Sturbaum?
Yeah, we appreciate the sincerity and the concern about the climate change, which we all share. You know, our responsibility is to live today, tomorrow, and the future. You know, it's easy to say policing won't matter. Policing will matter even more if there's disruption from climate change. And so today, how we live today, how we live tomorrow, how we live in 10 years, we have to balance all of that and understand that. And that's what the council does. That's what the community does. We hear the alarm. We share it. We also have to work day to day. So thank you for bringing that. Thank you for sounding the alarm. We do know it's a moral question. And yet we have to wake up tomorrow and get to work, and we want jobs for people downtown. We want a community that's thriving. So we balance. So that's my response to all hands on deck. Meanwhile, we still have to keep the boat going. Thank you.
Other council member comments? Yes, Councilmember Volin?
As I have since 2014, I'm trying to reserve most of the questions that I want to ask to a written set that I'll submit. And this year we've been fortunate from a timing standpoint to not have had a lot of public comment, so the budget process is going quickly. But this particular presentation has generated some actual debate, and I think it's worth addressing. Because I think that at the root of the complaints we heard from the public, the legitimate concerns about climate change, are the 2006 ordinance that Councilman Barallo authored defining sustainability and the immediate aftermath of that ordinance. So I learned, and I continue to have in my mind, the definition that sustainability is a three-legged stool. There's economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, and social sustainability. And all I've heard in recent years is the use of the word sustainability to mean environmental sustainability. That is not what the word means, last I checked, okay? We have two different commissions. We have an environmental commission and a sustainability commission. And if the only thing the Sustainability Commission is doing is talking about the environment, then it's not following that ordinance. In the immediate aftermath of that ordinance, the previous administration created or remade the Department of Economic Development into Economic and Sustainable Development, missing the point, okay? Economics is a component of sustainability. It should have been a sustainability department, but it is primarily being run as an economic development department, in which case is doing well. It's, the department is doing a very good job of economic development. So I agree with the critique of sustainability not being its own department. It should be. And frankly, it should be reversed. Economics should be a part of sustainability. You know, like, everyone who is saying we're not being sustainable is kind of missing the point. But we do need to rethink about the definition of this division. And again, to create a separate economic development department and a sustainability department, the sustainability has to be like innovation. It has to be, I mean, I'm not exactly sure what the definition of the innovation director is, but I had imagined when the sustainability coordinator was first created in 2008, that position and the innovation director position that came in this term should have had some kind of authority over all departments. Neither of those roles has the clout to tell departments you have to change. I don't know how to make that happen. That itself is the beginning of the radical change that those who are arguing that climate change must become paramount need to seek first. Until we do that, we're going to keep having this debate, and it's not going to be productive. I wish Ms. Travis good luck in her new position as I forget what the Assistant Director for Sustainability. I would beg somebody to answer me the question, how do you all define that term anymore? I told you what I thought the definition was, what it should have been all this time, but no one's going to be happy until we redefine that term. So other than that, I want to say that you know, any new economic development is going to increase carbon emissions by definition if there's new business and new workers, new people in town living here, commuting here. So, you know, one argument to result of the argument that we need to focus entirely on climate change is that maybe we need to stop doing any economic development because it would impact the climate. I don't think that we can agree to that. I think what we need to do is come up with a definition that says at what more efficient rate can we expand the economy while not impacting the environment, okay? This is why I've been arguing that it doesn't matter how much parking is built. It matters how much parking per bedroom is built. It doesn't matter how much parking is built. It matters how much parking per 1,000 square feet of commercial office space is built. We have yet to make those definitions because as much as people who rightly say that the climate should be our top priority, as right as they are, we don't turn a battleship that quickly. We're turning the battleship of the city, and it takes time to turn it. The way we turn it is by making those specific definitions, at least when it comes to parking. We need to come up with other terms that define for us what is an acceptable rate of change in social and environmental areas to get this new economic development. We haven't come up with those terms. So, you know, agree with Councilmember Rallo on the question of building new parking garages, only because I know, according to science, that if you're going to have a completely built-out environment, you don't want every single building having structured parking in it. You want it consolidated into a centralized parking structure. But that's only if you know that everything around it will get built up. Okay, so I can only give Councilmember Rallo limited support with that definition. But these more complicated definitions that will really make a difference in attacking climate change while not throwing the baby out with the bathwater are ones we have yet to make. I'm going to be passing on this budget tonight only because, as a separate issue from all the things I've just said, I was disappointed with the hesitant statements that Councilmember Piedmont Smith pointed out in the presentation, evaluating the viability of goals, the development of goals. I mean, I understand what Mr. Crowley was getting at, but I think we need to get more concise quicker. So, terms like focus on this or do that, I've never been satisfied to see it in any department's budget. But in this department, which I think it's important that we have more concrete statements than some of those. But I generally agree with what I've heard, and I, from my experience, that as far as economic development goes, the department's doing very well. And now we have to come up with a better definition, because it's not any one person's fault in the department. It is the misbegotten definition of sustainability that we've all been thinking we were acting under that needs to be reaffirmed or redone, perhaps in the design of department structure. And I'll remind my colleagues and the public that we do not have the authority to tell the administration how to administer. We are not the executive. We can encourage, we can threaten, but we cannot say you need to create, we can only say it as a, and we can make it the assertion. We can't force them to define a new department or split the department. We can only use the bully pulpit here. So I can urge the administration to take this debate seriously, because until we get those definitions right, we're going to keep having this debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rallo, you wanted 30 seconds more for an additional comment?
Another bite at the apple, my first time. Yes, Councilmember Volin says that sustainability is composed of the three legs: environment, economy, and equity. But the proper way of looking at them is nested hierarchies. The environment comes first. We need a livable biosphere in order to have an economy at all. So the first task is a livable biosphere. Second is considering economy composed of energy and materials throughput from the biosphere. And then equity depends upon resources that are crucial to human needs, derived from the environment through the economy that serves human needs. So the proper way of looking at it is a nested hierarchy, not just a three-legged stool.
All right, Councilmember Ruff.
I'm not sure if I understood correctly when a council member made an earlier comment that any unit increase in economic development is going to necessitate more effects on the environment contributing to climate change. And I was going to ask Councilman Rallo, before he used his last 30 seconds, second bite at the apple, to talk about his example that he made earlier on food production, on localizing food production. But I think the idea is pretty clear that you can have unit economic development done in a way that increases local economic activity and reduces greenhouse gas emissions at the same time. Hence the idea of localizing food production. You get the economic activity of that industry localized, and at the same time you can potentially dramatically increase net effects on the environment through gas emissions, through the effects of how locally and how you actually generate that that part of the economy. And that doesn't apply just to food production, though that's a very clear one. There are countless examples of just the construction of the use of solar, of alternative energy sources. There's a huge economy there. To build that energy economy, you don't lose economic activity. You can actually increase economic activity and severely, dramatically reduce environmental impacts. I mean, that's the whole idea of this transition. And it's the myth of or lack of understanding on the part of some people that you can't have one. If you try to address climate change and environmental, try to address the environmental degradation, then you're obviously going to lose economic activity. You're going to have a reduced economy, and that's just wrong, just absolutely wrong-headed. That's a sort of a fundamental misunderstanding, I think, that we see locally, state, nationally, and globally, where people are not really understanding that. We're not talking necessarily about shrinking. We're talking about doing things differently in ways that will maintain the economy and reduce our global environmental impact. Anyway, thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. I so enjoyed the lively debate. But what I will say is that I do agree that this is a moral issue, and particularly the sustainability and climate change part. But one of the things that I have some difficulty with, even though I agree with, I think we all can agree that this body, or any other body that I know of, cannot legislate morality. That was why some of my questions had to do with more direct community people, individual folks. That's where I think the debate will be productive. I think I heard up here that until we define things or whatever, then the debate won't be productive. Well, I disagree. I think the debate it may not be as productive as we would hope, but I think it will always be productive. I myself, and I am indebted to some of the folks that speak in the public, because I've talked with them later. I've done some other research. I've broadened my understanding of some of the points that this person and these people were trying to make. So that ship that we talked about is turning. Well, my individual big ship is turning. But still part of my governance responsibility is, how do we balance this? What takes priority? How do we fund it? And I understand later funding is not going to matter if there's, I don't want to debate that, but I do know there's a balancing act. I think it's more of a grassroots thing. This is a social justice thing. But more than that, I think it's a free will thing. And I think that's what we need to work on, is people's understanding and to change their will. I mean, that's one reason. Will is choice. That's one reason why I sustain multimodal, some of our infrastructure, because it gives people a choice to get out of the car and use something else on their free will to do what's right. So I respect and expect those continued discussions to educate the grassroots folks. We can have this groundswell. It's going to be more effective this way as opposed to this way. And so we still have more debate. Do not want to denigrate anything anyone said or disagree, because it's such a complex issue. But I just felt I think I needed to do that. You can have half the people agree and everything, but if the other half has free will and don't understand it, then you will never meet the goals that we even think we can set. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Volan, 30-second second bite.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, okay. I don't believe we shouldn't have no economic growth. It was a straw argument. I'm simply saying I can't do it in 30 seconds. I'm not interested in merely enlightening others or coming to agreement. I'm also interested in implementing the agreements that we come to. I would at least suggest that Councilmember Rallo write a new resolution explaining his new or has changed definition of sustainability. Because I'm going off the ordinance that he wrote that I voted for in 2006. And now it seems that there is a hierarchy. Maybe that's so because of exigent circumstances. But, I've counted on using the definition that we passed for this council. Thank you.
Thank you. I will take my opportunity at public comment, council comment. Where to begin? As I was reading this budget this weekend, I was reminded of everything the city does, and the city does a lot of wonderful things for the arts, for encouraging businesses, for the parks, the recreational opportunities. But as I was reading all these details, I felt like we need to focus on the crisis that's at hand. And that crisis is global climate change. We can't keep spreading ourselves thin and doing all these wonderful things. I'm sorry, Mr. Starwitz, I'm looking at you. I love the arts, I support the arts, but if the planet's uninhabitable, if 50% of the planet is uninhabitable, the arts are going to kind of drop off of the priority list. We need a World War II level mobilization to address climate change. This is not about balance, as some of my colleagues have said. It's about recognizing the dire nature of a problem that has already advanced and already caused havoc in many places on this planet. And recognizing that we cannot do business as usual. We need radical change in our budget, in our government, and we need to be more nimble than a battleship and make that change more quickly. That's just the reality we find ourselves in. And people don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about it. It's depressing. It freaks me out. But it's true. You read any of these scientific reports, and we must cut carbon emissions by 45% by 2030, by 100% by 2050. We are not even close to that path. We're not on that path in Bloomington, certainly not as a nation, but I think that Bloomington needs to set an example. We have a good start on that path, and we need to rapidly go that direction. And if that means we have less money for golf courses or for art displays, I'm sorry, but our priorities need to be on saving this planet. One of my favorite climate activists, Greta Thunberg, says, "Avoiding climate breakdown will require cathedral thinking. We must lay the foundation while we may not know exactly how to build the ceiling." And that speaks directly to this budget proposal from the Economic and Sustainable Development Department. There's too much concern about putting that last block on the ceiling, on the spire. We need to make rapid change now. We know it has to be done, so let's commit the resources. I was on the council when some of my colleagues and I spoke with Mayor Cruzan to get him to fund a sustainability position. And we said it should be its own department, or at least be directly reporting to the mayor. Well, he didn't do that. And then we have the Economic and Sustainability Department that was created a few years later. It's not logical to have sustainability under economic development, which, as my colleague pointed out, it is. And it's for 2019, it's totally insufficient. We need a department of of sustainability and climate action. It's past time for that. We need to make it a citywide priority. We need to make it a community-wide priority. And I also agree, I mean, I think all my colleagues have said smart things up here. I agree with Councilmember Sims that, we can't change people's behaviors. We can't say, well, no, you think A, now you need to think B. But we can make it easy to do the right thing. And we need to make it easier for people to do the right thing, to not drive, to compost their yard waste, to get a job that is, reusing and repurposing used plastic rather than selling more widgets at Walmart. If this economic development task force that was mentioned with the BEDC and the chamber, if their focus is on creating green jobs, I'm all for it. And as Councilmember Ruff said, these jobs, this is an essential part of addressing climate change, is embracing the new economy of green jobs, of building solar panels, of installing them, of repurposing used plastic to keep it out of our oceans, of developing local food networks. There can be economic development, but it needs to be subservient to our addressing climate change and sustainability. I think that the report from and the proposal from the Economic and Sustainable Development Department, it lists several things twice, so it looks like we're doing more than we really are. It has some of this kind of wimpy language in it. I understand that we don't want to commit to things we can't do, but it's just not enough. It's just not enough. And I think that this is the reason I'm going to be voting against it. And I think that we need, unless we get a bigger portion of the budget and a bigger portion of staff resources dedicated to addressing climate change, I don't see how I can vote for this budget at all. All right, so do we have a recommendation?
Move to pass. Second.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Rallo?
Yes.
Piedmont Smith?
No.
Bolin?
Pass.
Sims?
Yes.
Sturbaum?
Yes.
Sandberg?
Yes.
Ruff?
Pass.
That's 4-1-2.
All right. Thank you. Thank you to all the members of ESD who are here. And we move on to Community and Family Resources. Ms. Callender Anderson.
This will be a 15-minute presentation with 12 minutes of questions. I'll remind my colleagues, we have no limits on debate. We did not set any limits for ourselves on it. We might want to consider that in the future. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Beverly Callender Anderson, Director of Community and Family Resources Department. The purpose of the Community and Family Resources Department is to help improve the quality of life in Bloomington by coordinating programs and services that are designed to strengthen community engagement and family ties, and to increase overall community capacity to address social issues. From promoting volunteerism to enhancing community wellness to addressing diversity issues, to coordinating public safety education initiatives, CFRD's staff work to promote and enhance quality of life for all Bloomington residents and visitors and help build a strong and vital community. With 9 full-time staff, the CFRD team is able to accomplish many of our goals with the assistance of interns and fellows from Indiana University and Ivy Tech Community College. Our major initiatives include supporting 6 commissions, the Council on Community Accessibility, the Monroe County Domestic Violence Task Force, the Monroe County Domestic Violence Coalition, Michael's going to kill me, and the Safety, Civility, and Justice Initiative. I'd like to take this opportunity to publicly thank our CFRD team for their commitment and hard work throughout the year. Josefa Luce, Shatoya Moss, Sue Owens, Michael Shermas, Lucy Shake, who was recently named coordinator of the Bloomington Volunteer Network, and our new after-hours ambassador, Jenna Whitaker, all worked very hard during the year, and I thank them. You have a full list of the department's 2019 accomplishments and 2020 goals in our memo, but I'd like to highlight a few of the department's key programs and projects. In the area of engagement, In 2019, the Bloomington Volunteer Network increased pro bono and skill-based volunteerism by 10% through an outreach strategy that included personal presentations to local businesses and corporations, in addition to online, electronic, print media, and other resources. In the area of safety, civility, and justice initiative, we continue to convene the Community Coordinating Council as they provide oversight to the implementation of the Safety, Civility, and Justice Task Force recommendations and identify new issues facing the community. You met our new after-hours ambassador, Jenna Whitaker, at a recent council meeting. This position was a result of a recommendation from the Safety, Civility, and Justice Task Force. In the area of diversity, the department has produced 4 episodes of the Facebook series Our Table, Our Talk, discussing issues facing Bloomington's diverse community and designed to encourage further discussions. An additional 4 episodes are slated to be released this fall. If you missed Our Table, Our Talk, they are available by visiting the Office of the Mayor Facebook page. A youth summit for middle school-aged African-American male students was held in January of this year, and there were 47 students in attendance, along with many parents. The 6 commissions staffed by CFRD have been very busy this year, and time does not allow me to report all the accomplishments of the commissions, but I'd like to highlight the city's Commission on the Status of Black Males, who participated for the 3rd year in a national initiative called the Million Father March, where fathers and other male mentors and supporters are invited to welcome children back to school on the first day of school. This year, the commission increased participation from 10 to 42 participants that came out to welcome and encourage students as they began a new academic year. In the mayor's remarks on Monday, he spoke about the Youth Participatory Budgeting Project, which is an initiative of the Commission on the Status of Children and Youth. This project has engaged 11 youth as steering committee members and 16 as delegates. They've designed and implemented a process for collecting ideas for community improvements from other youth in the community, and are developing those ideas into proposals which will be voted on by youth ages 13 to 18 in September. And we're looking forward to seeing what project they will be funding. Lastly, in this category, the Bloomington Commission on the Status of Women increased participation and diversity at its annual Women's Leadership Development event by over 10% through promotional efforts and by developing a more diverse planning team. So now we'll move on to our 2020 goals. In the area of engagement, CFRD will respond to the issue of substance misuse disorder by developing and promoting a campaign focused on material needs and engagement opportunities for nonprofits serving children and families impacted by substance use disorder. This will give individuals and organizations an easily accessible place to find ways to help. We will encourage and celebrate individuals and groups in our community who contribute their time and talent to local nonprofits through the Be More Awards, increasing nominations by 10%. In the area of safety, civility, and justice, we'll continue to implement and monitor the 30 Safety, Civility, and Justice Task Force recommendations, with 3 new recommendations to be implemented in 2020. We also plan to implement a volunteer downtown ambassador program. Much like the Parks Ambassadors, Downtown Ambassadors will provide hospitality to downtown patrons and visitors, observe identified areas, and report any improprieties to the After Hours Ambassador for follow-up. And we're continuing to work with the Monroe County Opioid Commission to increase knowledge of substance use disorder, help reduce stigma, and provide resources for treatment options. The Commission is hosting its 3rd annual South Central Opioid Summit on September 24th at the Monroe County Convention Center, and that summit is open to the public. Tickets are available on eventbrite.com, so just a little commercial for that. Oh, sorry, I didn't turn the thing. In the area of diversity, as Human Resources Director Caroline Shaw discussed Monday, our departments are co-sponsoring a speaker series for staff on various forms of diversity, including aging, disabilities, sexual identity, religion, generational similarities and differences, and socioeconomics. We will also be coordinating a Young Women's Leadership Summit in the fall of 2020, focused on African American and Latina middle and high school age females. and will continue to work with the fire department to monitor and improve their diversity recruitment plan. We'll also work to help assure a diverse applicant pool for all city positions by sharing employment opportunities with organizations serving racial and religious minorities and through social media platforms. You have a list of goals from each of the commissions as part of our memo, but to highlight just a few. We'll work with the Office of the City Clerk to develop an onboarding program for new commission and board members to assure consistency across all commissions and boards. The Commission on Aging will host 3 workshops or public events on the lifetime community concept. The Commission on the Status of Black Males will recognize 4 outstanding African American leaders of the future, 2 male and 2 female. The Commission on the Status of Children and Youth will implement Phase 2 of the Youth Participatory Budgeting Program, utilizing what we learned from 2019 to improve the process and increase participation. The Commission on Hispanic and Latino Affairs will plan health education for early detection, screening, and patient navigation for follow-up care to 100 underserved Hispanic and Latino residents, publishing a comparison of testing and follow-up rates from 2019 to 2020. The MLK Commission will secure the sponsorship to provide the January community celebration of Dr. King's life and legacy and a commemoration of his assassination in April. Realizing the intersection of demographics, the Commission on the Status of Women will increase the number of events co-sponsored by the city and county women's commissions and will work with other city commissions when there is an overlap in missions. The Council for Community Accessibility will survey new and existing public facilities for compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act guidelines and award a minimum of 30 new decals. The Monroe County Domestic Violence Coalition will publish 2 updates to domestic violence statistics countywide. You can see there are no major changes in our budget for 2020. Our overall general fund budget request is $816,807. This is an increase of $17,560, or 2%. So in total, our budget request is a 2% increase over 2019. We feel the 2020 CFRD budget request reflects and aligns with the departmental goals of building a healthy, engaged community, creating a climate where residents and visitors feel safe, behave with civility, and where problem-solving is performed with justice as an overarching value, creating a work environment where employees strive to better understand the perspectives of others and that enables residents to participate in the government process and perform a vital role in making democracy work on a local level. I thank you for your consideration of our 2020 budget, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Calendar Anderson. Are there questions from council? No questions? Okay.
Cool.
We'll go to the public. The public has a comment on this budget. Seeing none, back to council for a comment. Councilmember Volin.
Yes, I would like to submit briefly that the work of Ms. Calendar Anderson and her staff in CFRD is economic development. We, as a country, have given foreign aid often to other countries, often to get them to stop doing things that affect the environment because they have economic or social needs, particularly economic. The burning of the rainforest in the Amazon is happening right now at a record pace. We may not be able to see it as easily on the local level, but I, for one, firmly believe that this is not just, I mean, this is the example of the social sustainability I was talking about, and it is as key to sustainability as everything else we talked about tonight. And I would argue that it has an economic impact that is absolutely beneficial to the city. We just can't measure it that easily. Something to think about. I support this budget. Thank you.
We're already on comment?
Yes.
Yeah. Any other comments from council members? Yes, Councilmember Sims?
Thank you. Thank you for that report, Ms. Calendar Anderson. I don't think I have to twist arms to get folk to agree with us, and particularly we just got done with some of our campaigning stuff. But one of the things that I've promoted, many of us have, has been the quality of life aspects of this city. And I think CFRD does that from a social standpoint, even broader than that. But one of the things I'm really impressed about is the partnerships and the collaborations that just move throughout the community that just makes this a better place for all of us to live together. So I appreciate that. I will support this budget, or this request, I should say. But I just wanted to say that these are one of the things that makes, and we could say the same about many other departments, but this is one specifically that makes this just a better city for us to live in. And I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilmember Sandberg?
I agree. Our budgets up to this point have been about the basic services, police, fire, administration, legal, all the things that we need to keep the wheels turning in any well-organized and rationally managed city. But what we have before us tonight with all four who have come before us, HAND and our Economic Sustainable Development, Community Family Resources, and coming up next, Parks and Recreations, this is the heart of your community. This is the people that make this community special. And for all the talk and for all the debates about all the problems that we face and how critical they are, and yes, we must address them, I do not want to govern a city that is not responsible to the heart of your community, the people of your community. And so I feel this budget is every bit as important as all the others that have come before us. And I will agree with many of my colleagues that taking a balanced approach to all the necessary functions of a city are what we are tasked with up here. It is not easy, and for anyone that wants to challenge our moral leadership, because we don't pick and decide which priorities are absolutely the ones we need to focus on at the expense of all the others, I simply will have to respectfully disagree. This is important, and I support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Other council member comments? Yes, Councilmember Rallo.
Thanks. I just want to extend my appreciation for your work. I think we've been challenged as a community in terms of civility and inclusiveness, and I know that you've been active in that and standing up to make sure that we maintain that in our community, and I appreciate your efforts, and I appreciate what you've done with the boards and commissions and everything that basically reminds us and extends throughout the city to remind us that we're all in this together. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Any other council comments? I just wanted to briefly say that I'm glad to hear there's going to be a third opioid summit. I hadn't heard about it, so very glad that that will continue because it's such a pressing issue in our community. All right, is there a recommendation?
Recommend you pass.
Second.
All right, will the clerk please call the roll on the Community and Family Resources Department budget?
Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Bolin.
Yes.
Sims.
Yes.
Sturbaum.
Yes.
Sandberg.
Yes.
Ruff.
Yes.
Rallo.
Yes.
Thank you.
7-0.
The recommendation is 7-0 on that particular budget. Thank you, Ms. Calendar Anderson. And we're ready for Parks and Recreation.
This is a 25-minute presentation, followed by 20 minutes of questions from council.
It's like a race. Good evening. I'm Paula McDevitt, and I'm the Director of the Parks and Recreation Department, and I'm happy to be before you this evening to present the 2020 Parks and Recreation General Budget Request. I'd like to introduce a few members of our staff that are here this evening. Dave Williams, our Operations and Development Division Director, John Turnbull, our Sports Division Director, and Les Coyne, President of our Park Board of Commissioners. The Bloomington Parks and Recreation Department strives to provide the highest quality of parks, recreation services, and green space to enhance the quality of life in our community. This infographic gives you a quick look at all the things that we do. I'd like to point out our gold medal winning national award. We have been CAPRA accredited since 2001. We oversee over 2,000 acres of property, 32 parks, 28 playgrounds, 37.6 miles of trails. We are currently managing through a $6.9 million park bond project list. We are in the final 3 months of the $34 million build-out of Switchyard Park, and we do this with our 53 full-time staff members. A little bit of background on our department. As I said, we have 52.3 or almost 53 full-time employees, and we have 48.9 seasonal employees, and that is the full-time equivalent in our seasonal employee staffing. We do the work in the Bloomington Parks and Recreation Department through 4 divisions: administration, recreation, sports, and operations. Our major initiatives include recreation, sports, programs, and events, comprehensive tree inventory, natural resources and sustainability best practices and initiatives, Switchyard Park development and management, park bond projects, and bicentennial projects. I'm going to take a few minutes just to highlight a few of our 2019 department goals that we've either accomplished or are in the process of accomplishing, and I will do this by division. First, in administration and community relations, this is our customer service staff who are responsible for program registrations and customer service answering questions. Community relations is responsible for marketing all the programs, services, and facilities throughout the entire department. They also oversee our social media team, sell advertising, sell sponsorships to allow many of our community events to either be low cost, no cost. And in addition, we manage the volunteer program in this area. In the recreation division, we have health and wellness, Kids City, community events, and Banneker Community Center. We are coming off a very successful summer season, both at Kids City Camp, having accomplished 87 registrations per week, and Banneker Community Center averaged 80 participants in their day camp program. The community events team, which we continue to hear from our community in surveys, want more community events. Their new community event, which was a Bloomington Trail Outdoor Escape Adventure, sold out with 125 participants in 28 teams. Moving on to our operations division, we have natural resources, operations, landscaping, cemetery, and urban forestry. The natural resources staff have been working on construction documents for the Griffey Lake Nature Preserve accessible fishing pier. Operations, in addition to taking care of a lot of that, the data in our infograph, also do jobs like replacing split rail fencing and replacing drinking fountains. Landscaping continues to eradicate invasive plants and plant native plantings, and our urban forester has been busy not only pruning and planting and removing trees, but also managing the contract with Davy Trees, which are doing a tree inventory for us. In the sports division, we have aquatics, golf services, Twin Lakes Recreation Center, adult sports services, and youth sports services, again coming off a successful season. In the aquatics area, we implemented a $50 season pass. After a lot of community feedback, the golf course secured lease agreements for 75 new golf carts, which were delivered earlier this spring. Twin Lakes Recreation Center is continuing to attract a lot of facility rentals, court rentals, and the staff in adult sports services and youth sports services are continually to be creative in attracting rentals and tournament play at their facilities. I'd like to take a few minutes just to update you on our $6.9 million park bond projects, which you all know takes care of a lot of our capital improvement projects throughout the whole park system. These are a few of the highlights from 2019. Bryan Park Pool and Mills Pool had extensive work done in both their mechanical pump rooms and both bathhouses, which were complete for opening on Memorial Day weekend. And this is a picture of the new fitness equipment that we cut the ribbon on at Bryan Park earlier this spring. Additional projects include court resurfacing. We are responsible for 19 tennis courts, 4 pickleball courts and 14 outdoor basketball courts, so we are continually resurfacing courts. This is a picture of the Crestmont Playground, which is currently under construction, and we are building this playground with our own in-house, very talented operations staff. Up at Cascades Golf Course, a lot of activity there. This is a picture of the Zoysia turf, which was just put down on the quarry course this year. And then this picture of the new clubhouse that was taken yesterday will have a pro shop, conference room, locker rooms, and an adjoining banquet room with outdoor seating overlook the course, and that project's in its final weeks of construction. Continuing with park bond projects, Griffey Lake Nature Preserve restroom improvements were done, again, another in-house project. And we are currently resurfacing several playgrounds, including playground surface at Alcott Park, Broadview Park, and Winslow Woods underneath the arch swing. Now, we all know we celebrated our bicentennial in 2018, and we finished the year with your approval of a $10 million bicentennial bond project list, and I'd like to highlight the projects that the Parks Department are currently engaging in, starting with the Lower Cascades Trail project. We have a consultant currently working on a conceptual design with input from staff, administration, and community input, and we look forward to this design unveiling this fall. We also have a consultant under contract to begin to look at 4 sites for potential gateway projects. Duke Energy Trail, which is this map on the right, is a trail, an east-west potential trail under the Duke Energy lines. We've had early conversations with Duke, but definitely interested in this east-west trail, which is immediately across the street from Switchyard Park. In addition, Griffey Lake Nature Preserve Loop Trail is on the plans for a soft surface trail. And then contracted tree planting, the Bicentennial Bond Project has funding for 1,400 brand new trees, which again, we are waiting the results of the Davy tree canopy study to identify areas for these new trees. Now turning our attention to the 2020 budget goals. Again, I'll go through those by division area, starting with administration. I'd like to call your attention to the request to contract with a consultant for, believe it or not, our next 5-year master plan that will take us from 2021 to 2025. And our work in 2020 next year will be to work with a consultant to do a community survey and then draft our master plan. In community relations, continue to sell sponsorships and advertising. We are looking at a redesign of our seasonal program guide. With the activation of Switchyard Park, we anticipate needing a couple of more pages in our program guide, and that is a guide we put out 3 times a year seasonally, and it continues to be the #1 way our community learns about our programs, parks, and services. This area will also continue to increase advertising and work with over 1,000 volunteers. In the Recreation Division, you will start to hear me talk a lot about activation of Switchyard Park in the Recreation Division area, and we'll start with health and wellness with the goal to coordinate 1 new fitness and wellness program per quarter with at least 15 participants at each program at Switchyard Park, and increase participation in the Veterans Day Run, which we held for the first time last year, and we'd like to see our participation numbers go up to 100. At the Allison Jukebox Community Center, Youth Services, this facility is the ideal location for the successful just completed their 26th year of Kids City Camp and Kids City Break Days, so focus will be on capacity during the school year in that building. It's a wonderful building. It's open for rentals and programming, so we'll be putting 2020 efforts into increased capacity at that facility. Moving along to community events, we would like to create a concert series for Switchyard Park on the beautiful new stage currently under construction, and we will engage and work with a variety of community groups and organizations to hold a new large-scale event with more than 2,000 people. We believe there's going to be several of those. And then also creating 2 new events at Switchyard Park just done by our department. Continuing on in community events, the Farmers Market is in the community events program area, and again emphasizing Switchyard Park, moving the Tuesday market down to Switchyard Park, and offering concerts and food trucks just to increase participation in our Tuesday weekly market. And finally, Banneker Community Center 2020 goals are focused on partnerships and community collaboration to invite people into Banneker for their own festivals and events, community meeting spaces, emphasis on our preschool programming, our sports programming participation, increasing participations there, and offering 2 family events per season to increase participation. These family events, which is the picture that you see there, are widely popular. Moving on to the Operations Division, 2020 goals in natural resources, again, building out the accessible fishing pier, conducting a bird inventory. In Operations, working on a preventative maintenance manual for efficiencies and an accreditation standard, keeping up with all the repairs that happen daily, and assisting at Switchyard Park as needed. Landscaping, again, this is a new position that we are requesting in landscaping, a working 4-person position with the emphasis on all the invasive plant removal and the acres and acres that is taking us a long time to get at, transitioning to gardening for biodiversity, planting a lot of native pollinator gardens. We are asking for this full-time position, someone that has a lot of knowledge in the native ecosystem and invasive plant management, in addition to a lot of community education in that area. Cemeteries, we have a 2020 goal to design a scatter garden and green burial area at White Oak Cemetery. And in urban forestries, continue with planting, pruning, and removing trees. Again, we are looking forward to the results of the Davy publicly owned trees and park tree inventory that will dictate where we have areas for tree groves or vacant plots for trees to be planted. Moving on to the sports division, we have aquatics looking to increase attendance at Mills Pool. We just had to adjust this number the other day because we already met our goal for 2020, so that's exciting. And again, capacity there. Frank Southern Ice Arena, providing 500 hours of public skating and increasing capacity there for participation. Golf services with the investment up at Cascades Golf Course, looking to have 20,000 participants playing 18 hole rounds of golf. And at Twin Lakes Recreation Center, continuing to rent that facility, which are courts, the turf, or the entire facility for large tournaments and events. Continuing on in sports, adult sports services and youth sports services, again, both of those areas are seeing a downward trend in participation, so working creatively to have tournaments come with lots of spectators, again in adult sports services to host one national softball tournament in July, creating an economic impact of over $500,000, and youth sports services, again, to attract users to Alcott and Winslow. And here we are at Switchyard Park. In 2018, we worked with a consultant on an organizational development plan, and that was to identify existing internal resources that we could use at Switchyard Park. And out of that plan, we identified an existing position and named a general manager of Switchyard Park, and also moving a working foreman over to Switchyard Park. So we do have a request to hire and train one additional, so that would give us 2 working for people at the Switchyard Park, purchasing critical operations equipment so we can maintain this new park, continuing our park ambassador, or expanding our park ambassador program to Switchyard Park with 1 or 2 ambassadors, and have all aspects of the park complete by the spring of 2020. We have the potential to generate revenue at Switchyard Park through special use permits, pavilion rentals, and stage rentals, host for events, and then we've also listed some sample activities. These are some brand new events and existing events that we would like to move to Switchyard Park. Sustainability efforts occurring in natural resources, operations and landscaping, LED lights, replacing gas-powered vehicle on the B line. We have accomplished that. Also doing work in sustainability in urban forestry with all of the new plantings, cemetery, native plantings there, and the scatter garden. Switchyard Park Pavilion, we will be putting in 30 trash recycling bins at Switchyard Park. The pavilion will be LEED Silver certified, and the police substation will be LEED certified. And of course, we have our solar panels installed at 10 different sites. So by category, our highlights are Category 1, a personnel request of $5,618,000, or a 7% increase. This increase is due to the request for 2 new positions and also the Year 2 implementation of the living wage rates for all seasonal employees, and our seasonal rates will be $13.21 to $15.10. Category 2, we have a request for $577,614, a 2% decrease. In Category 3, other services and charges, a request for $2,175,789, and these increases are in the travel for expenses for certification and learning opportunities for staff. Water and sewer increases are due to CBU's stormwater rate increases. Building repairs, we have funding for Buskirk Chumley Theater and repairs at some of the operations buildings. And in lease payment line, the increase is for the number 2 year of a 4-year lease agreement for the golf carts and the solar panel lease payments. Category 4, capital outlays request is $153,000, and this category has the following as requested: some equipment in operations, a hurricane biovac, a wide track dingo for urban forestry, a golf turf sprayer, and a turf roller to take care of our new turf out at the golf course, and 2 operation division vehicles. So in summary, the 2020 general fund budget request for Parks and Recreation is $8,524,754, or an increase of $321,968, 4% increase. So in conclusion, the budget reflects increases that align with the stated goals of the administration, Recreation, Operations, and Sports Division, again with emphasis on our tree inventory, natural resources, and sustainability best practices and initiatives, the Switchyard Park development and now activation and management, finishing up our park bond projects and our bicentennial bond projects. So with this, I'd like to thank you for your consideration of the Parks and Recreation 2020 budget request, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Ms. McDevitt. Are there questions on the Parks and Recreation budget? We'll go to my left first with Councilmember Sturbaum.
Yes, we met the other day with the Prospect Hill Neighborhood Group, and I understood that there were going to be 2 personnel who are going to be kind of supervising later in the evening to help enforce park rules. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, you did. And the request is in our seasonal line, and we currently have a park patrol that have patrol late afternoon until closing at 11 p.m. So our request is for additional funds so that we can hire 2 overnight park patrol. They would work together. We would want them out there together, but covering the hours 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., so giving us more coverage. We've never tried that before, and currently our park patrol is effective in communicating with BPD or our maintenance staff if there's a need that they find when they're out on patrol. So we're encouraged by this idea to have an overnight park patrol, 2 members to do that.
Right, I was glad to hear that. And then, you know, the change to the $50 pass, I think that's been a benefit to some people, but I've heard complaints about losing the old opportunity to have more people use the single pass. You know, you'd go with 3 people, you could get 3 punches, and I wonder if you'd consider going to both. Because for some families, the small pass option, they spend $50 they go 10 times or something, that's a good deal. But if they try to buy for each of their individual children, it turns out to be a large outlay of money, and they wouldn't, you know what I mean? It gives them an economic option.
And I think we are definitely still tweaking and working with that. We got a lot of public input at the end of the pool season. People came to our park board meeting and gave us some suggestions. It was discussed here. So we tried this season pass. We are just wrapping up our season, Labor Day weekend, so staff will, like we do every year, look at the data, see what was popular, what worked, what didn't work,
Right.
community input again. So we are open to looking at the data and listening to the public and trying out what works best. So
Yeah, like you,
we'd
it
be
just
open to
sounded
that.
great to me too, but I was surprised to hear from some people that it didn't work out for their families. And then I didn't notice statistically what you're doing for cemetery repair this year, but I noticed you did 50 last year, if I understand right.
Correct. We do 50 a year. That's always what we do every year.
Right.
Currently, we have replaced 32 at Rose Hill, and we have then 50 down for next year as well.
Right, right. I think you ought to brag about the peonies a little more than you do. That's awesome when those come out.
They're beautiful. I agree.
Thank you.
I just want to remind my colleagues to please be specific in what you're talking about for the public's benefit. I believe Councilmember Sturbaum at first he was referring to the pool passes, and then he was referring to the gravestones. But neither time did he actually say those things. So I just want to keep in mind, there are people in the public that don't have the context that we may have here.
Thanks for the translation.
All right, Councilmember Rollo?
Always very impressive. So little time to ask questions, so I'll cut to the chase on the topic du jour, which is climate change this evening. It's clearly going to involve Parks and Recreation because you manage so much land. You're already moving ahead in very promising ways in terms of increasing biodiversity and plantings and so forth. Is it possible to develop as part of the action plan, evaluating a census of available land controlled by utilities and parks that would be amenable for tree planting so that that could be incorporated as part of the strategy? I mean, as you mentioned, Ms. McDevitt, we allocated a bond for 1,500 trees, but we really, 1,400 trees, I think, right?
1,400.
But we need an order of magnitude more than that, and that's a pretty tall order. And I just would like to know, is it possible to evaluate space for that within the park system?
Well, I think the Davy Tree contract is going to give us a lot of very, very useful information. So they did a canopy study and then also inventoried, and their mapping, the preliminary results that I have seen will speak just to that. So we will see areas and zones. So I think that's a start, and we could continue that conversation and see what comes out of that.
Okay, extending on the tree inventory then, this would be an opportunity to find out where we can apply. Okay, great, thank you.
And that will also come, I'll add, with an interactive website, so the community can go on and actually interact with this and see what trees are on their streets and the condition of their trees and where we have these open plots and that. It's going to be very exciting, and that will be unveiled September 17th at an evening open event.
Great, and I should mention that, prairie plants are as good as sequestering carbon as trees, so we could, and that's part of, what's that? Okay. So that should be part of our attention too. It's not just trees, but a diverse habitat. So this is wonderful, thank you.
Other questions from council members? I have a question. I want to follow up on what Councilmember Rollo was talking about with the need for more trees as carbon sinks. I did not know that a prairie can also absorb as much carbon as trees, so learn something every day. The golf course, has there been any consideration in using that land for a more ecologically beneficial purpose?
No. We've been focusing our park bond projects up there with actually replacing turf with the zoysia, which grows a lot better and thicker and denser and doesn't require as much watering. So that is the focus of the projects up there and the environment up there.
So there have been no discussions at all about maybe using that land to address climate change in some way?
Not real in-depth, but we certainly could do that.
I think that would be wise. I also have a question about the monastery at Lower Cascades. It said you have some money in the budget to demolish it.
Yes.
Is that a building that cannot be repurposed at all? Can you talk a little more about that?
Sure. We purchased the monastery and the property that the monastery sits on through the park bond funds. We purchased that back in early 2018. And then we also did, once we purchased it, we did a study and went in and really took a closer look at the facility for the feasibility of would we want to operate it or rehab it for use. And it just has too many issues and conditions that is not something that we want to do. It would just take too much to rehab it and reopen it. And then the fact also that we are building the new clubhouse just up the road from that. And so, you know, anything that we might have done with the monastery as far as an event space or that we're able to do up in the new clubhouse. And so the plan is to demolish the monastery and just revert that space back into green space, which will give a really nice conclusion, nice little extra piece to Lower Cascades Park. And with the emphasis with the new trail down there, that will all wrap into one project. But we won't be trying to rehab or do anything with the monastery.
So it was not in a condition where you might have considered using it as a clubhouse?
It was. It had a lot of ADA issues. It has electrical issues, plumbing issues. It would have been a really costly project, and one when we weighed all the other things that we were doing, it just didn't match up. That's something we wanted to do. So we're going to revert it back to green space.
All right. Any other questions? What? Nope. We'll go to the public. Anybody in the public want to comment on the Parks and Recreation budget proposal? Mr. Coyne, come on up. And do state your name for the record and sign in.
I'm Les Coyne. I currently chair the Board of Park Commissioners. I'm coming before you just to simply say thank you. You have stood by us for many years, and particularly in the last decade. You've provided us a capability of meeting the high expectations this community has for this department. Your support has allowed us and provided us guidance on how to do that, and we appreciate that. We also appreciate, and they appreciate, the individual efforts. I want to particularly recognize Mr. Rollo, who has helped us with some really challenging issues. As we go forward, we're going to be able to provide the community improved services. The expectations are there. The department believes in excellence because that's what this community demands. And we've been lucky enough with your support to respond to that. And I think it's also important to recognize that it's allowed us to respond to the quality of life issues that we've been able to deal with and enhance in this community for several years. The interesting thing is you've also been with us in the department in some leaps of faith in the last 10 years that have allowed us to move, particularly in the capital side, in areas that have shown significant benefits. And that's going to continue as we build out and finish the Switchyard Park in a lot of ways in terms of access and use and also in economic development. We have, again, I think made significant contributions in those areas, again, only with your help and the administration's support and leadership. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Anybody else from the public care to comment? Seeing none, we come back to council members, or if there are any comments from council members. Councilmember Rollo?
This is an extraordinary department. Every year it exceeds our expectations. It's a world-class department, and I think it's reflected in poll after poll of the public who appreciate Parks and Rec. And I mean, I could go on, and you've met a lot of the recreational needs of the community, and you continue doing so. I won't elaborate on that. I'm most impressed by really your focus on sustainability and biodiversity. I mean, when I go downtown and see the city street plots, plantings, I've gone to some high-quality prairies, for instance, in Kankakee or Baseline Prairie in southern Indiana, and you can see plants here in Bloomington downtown that you cannot see anywhere except for those rare communities. I mean, that's an extraordinary thing, and it's really a very bold thing to do, to take out what would be conventionally ornamental plants and put in something that is a little strange for some people. But I think seasonally they're gorgeous, but they also provide habitat and they provide food, pollinator services and things like that. So I think that's really extraordinary. So I really feel that this department is up to the challenge of comprehensively looking at our carbon situation as a community and our obligation, as the mayor has stated, as described in the Sustainability Action Plan. And part of that is sequestration, trees, prairies. Part of it is maybe some other, again, maybe a bold move in terms of sequestration. I noticed that we use urban wood waste to make bark mulch. I think that's a good thing. Could we use some of the wood waste to produce charcoal? Because charcoal is inert, it doesn't decompose very readily. It can be tilled into the soil. It builds carbon in the soil, and it doesn't return to the atmosphere for decades. So that would be, it's used in the tropics to build soil, but it's well known as a way of sequestering carbon. So that could be a potential for us to use as well. So I'm really looking forward to the tree survey, and thank you for the stewardship of our local our portion of the biosphere. I mean, everywhere we're seeing negative impacts, happy to say in Bloomington, we're responding to that, and we're up to the challenge, and we're expanding habitat for other organisms. And I think the community appreciates that. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Sturbaum.
Yes, I left Monday's meeting early because there was a meeting with the parks upstairs with my neighborhood. And I just feel that I must offer some constructive criticism to the Parks Department, which I agree is the best Parks Department in the world. And I love all the things that are being done, but we're starting to have a problem in some of our parks, and it's serious enough that there were 20 of my neighbors in the room talking about Building Trades Park starting to become an undesirable place to live by, an undesirable place to recreate in. And the problem is it's kind of starting to become occupied by homeless people and their drug activities at night. And the people who lived immediately near the park are talking about moving, not feeling safe going into the park at night. And we're hearing some reports like that about Butler Park, and we all know how Seminary Park operates, and that's kind of nobody goes there. Is the sad but true story. The conclusions, there were some conclusions of what could be done, to move a few things, move a ramp to an area that doesn't create such a easy hiding place, move a shelter so that it doesn't create an easy hiding place. And I understand that many of the parks are having some of these problems with shelters that are misused overnight. Rules by the parks that can't be enforced aren't being enforced. The police can't really enforce them. And we're moving into a bigger park now, and gosh, it's overwhelming when I realize how much square footage the Parks Department oversees. But this is a social change. It's a new normal You know, this is a park I've watched for 50 years, and we're in a different place now. And I think it may be time to consider more security as a part of the responsibility of the Parks Department. You know, I'd love to say the police can do it, but, you know, the police chief was in the office, in the meeting. He can't do it. He'll come do some things, but they're too spread out. And they're not gonna enforce little park rules all the time. You know, they've got sort of bigger fish to fry. So I don't know everything. You guys know a lot. You go to a lot of conferences. Everyone's in this problem in this country. You know, I get the Seattle paper just because I'm interested in what happens in Seattle online, and they have this problem on steroids. They're losing their parks, and people are moving from them. And, you know, for all the great part we're doing, it's kind of like a virus in the system that we have to pay attention to. And for quality of life, we want to provide parks that people are comfortable, happy, safe in. And it's not lost, but it's starting, and I think that's going to be something to be addressed over the next few years. And I sure appreciate that Parks has been making many efforts in that direction and have to clean up what happens overnight for the next day for the parks to be attractive. But I just wanted to be, I don't know if I'm the canary in the mine or if that park is, but we need to pay attention to those problems. So I hope you take that as constructive criticism. Doing everything great, but this is happening and it's real and it affects quality of life. So thank you very much for all you do. And I don't envy anybody trying to solve this problem, but it's real. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Other council member comments? I'd just like to make a couple of comments. I'm surprised nobody has brought it up so far, but we've had a tough summer for the Bloomington Community Farmers Market. So I do hope that we can find some way to revise the rules for vendors to make it clear that we do not provide a place for people to spread hatred or white supremacist ideas. And we do not condone people who have those ideas in our community. So good luck with that. I love the solar panels. That was a great photo of the Twin Lakes Recreation Center, where I go every weekend, covered with solar panels. It's great to see that. And we'll have some more in the new park. Is that right? And of course, the tree planting, the plans for planting more trees next year is excellent. But we need to seriously consider whether in 2019, in the face of overwhelming scientific evidence, we want to be in the business of providing a golf course. We really need to invest in carbon sinks, in carbon sequestration, which can be best done through planting trees and not zoysia or grass for a golf course. So I have serious reservations about that, and I see several expensive items on the list for support of the golf course in the 2020 budget. So I'm going to be passing this evening because I really need to consider whether I can support that. All right, is there a recommendation?
Second.
Will the clerk please call the roll on the Parks and Recreation budget?
Yes. Councilmember Volin?
Yes.
Sims?
Yes.
Sturbaum?
Yes.
Sandberg?
Yes.
Ruff?
Yes.
Rallo?
Yes.
Piedmont Smith?
Pass.
Thank you.
601.
That's a vote of 601, and that was our last budget for the evening.
We're
So
recessing.
we will go into recess until tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. Thank you.